100 players competing through 2 qualifiers to make it here to the finals of the Fortnite PlayStation Cup. I'm your host, Lightfoot Panda. Joining me today is none other than Bass. What's going on, my guy?
I am excited to be here. We are back with the PlayStation Cup, and not only are we back with the PlayStation Cup, but we are back with the very first one of the brand new year. It is 2023, but one thing that hasn't changed is we still have the PlayStation Cup around, and we've got a lot of top competitors coming in here today as we kick off Europe.
Oh, so many players that we'll have to get into there in a little bit, but we got to start with the format. Let's break all this down, get the people at home an understanding of what we're about to watch. Now, this weekend, like we mentioned before, there are 2 qualifiers leading to today's finals. Now, this is the standard BR mode. That means no zero build, no creative. Nah, this is your typical Battle Royale build mode. Get ready, because it's 100 solo players playing 6 games for their chance to take home some of the prizing. But you may be wondering, how can they take some of that prizing? Well, Bass has got you covered.
Well, here's how we're going to be breaking down the points here today. It's a little bit standard if you've watched any of the solo BR modes before here, as we've got 30 points to first place, 25 to second, 22 to third, and then, well, kind of just trickles down as we get all the way down to 75th place. If you want to make it to get some points guaranteed from placements, you have to make it past the first 25. And, well, in addition to making it past this first 25, you can also get some points for eliminations. 2 points for elimination here today. So, no matter which way you want to play it, you can get yourself a share of this prize pool. Panda, so much money on the line here today.
So much money indeed. First place walking away with $2,000. Now, listen, if maybe this is your first time in the PlayStation Cup, you're maybe not as confident, don't worry, man, because everybody that has made it to this point is walking away with a little piece of the cheddar here, Bass.
And they get at least $200 for participating. But again, the big threshold I think that everybody's going to be trying to pass here is going to be that 10th place mark. Once you make it into the top 10, every single place from there on out is going to gain you at least $100 more. And well, with so many different players coming back here today to compete in the PlayStation Cup, you know every single one of those is going to be absolutely running for that prize pool, Panda.
I mean, look, it's a pretty stacked lobby here. Looking through the qualifier players list, we have Rack back. We have Cade, we have Energy. These are players that have consistently shown their skills in these PlayStation Cups. And I believe there's a few more familiar names here on the list, Bass.
Yeah, there's a couple of returning players, and I think on the next page is going to be the one that I in particular want to talk about. If it comes up, no, he's not going to be on this page here. The good thing is I can still talk about him anyways. Pixovsky is also back as well. This is a player that you and I actually got to watch in the very first PlayStation Cup broadcast of last year, all the way back in September. And well, he has returned yet again in 2023 as well. And this is a player you absolutely have to keep your eyes on, with averaging over 6 eliminations per game during the qualifiers. You can see him on the left side right now. This is a player that you have to pay attention to, or he's going to blaze right past you.
You're absolutely right, but there are so many players. Newton, Nipsey, you also have Peace Moffrey. These are names that consistently find their way into big events like the PlayStation Cup, so I'm excited to see how they do. But you guys at home, listen, I understand, right? This is kind of exciting, and maybe you want your chance to do the same thing that these players are doing. Well, don't worry, we got you covered, because you can sign up for the PlayStation Cups at compete.playstation.com right now. Make sure you get over there, get signed up, and get involved, because it looks like these PlayStation Cups are going to be happening often, so you definitely want to get signed up. But for the people that have been competing in December and January, we have a special thing going on called the Win-a-thon. Now, rack up wins in PlayStation tournaments through all of December and January for a chance to win prizes like the new DualSense Edge controller or PS5 consoles. Yes, PS5s. So sign up on console and start competing for prizes today. The full rules can be read on compete.playstation.com. So just more reason for you all at home to go over to compete.playstation.com. If you're not on the website right now, while also watching this, make sure you stay here, of course. Then what are you doing? Go get involved. Go check it out. But we're almost ready for game number 1. But before we can get into game number 1, we got to break down what we're expecting here, because for all of you at home, maybe you aren't as familiar, you don't get to play Fortnite as often, we're in a brand new chapter here, and this is one of the first major events of the chapter.
It's not only a major event, but it's also been a major change coming into this chapter. A brand new map with brand new POIs all throughout it, as well as brand new weapons that we've never really been able to see in a competitive environment like this before.
Yep.
I think the one that you and I were just talking about that I'm very interested to see how it gets implemented today is going to be that Falcon Scout. Falcon Scout, for those that do not know, is both a scouting ability as well as it's also a little bit of a capture ability, as you can quite literally take players with that thing. So I don't really know how it's going to be implemented, but already we've seen some of these unique items implemented in the season. I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't mention how influential the hammer has become on this brand new chapter.
Yeah, look, the Shockwave Hammer probably going to be the strongest item used on the day. It is by far an incredible utility for mobility, but also exceptional damage done when the hammer connects with another player.
Yes.
I've seen some pretty interesting stuff. Somebody's gun actually just put out a tip video where you can drop a player that is 3 layers above you with one strike of the hammer and drop them into your box and catch them off guard. And they'll have no clue that it's coming because there's no kind of indication that it's about to happen. So stuff like that is the high-level gameplay I'm expecting to see here at the PlayStation Cup.
100%, especially that is an even more threatening combo when you combine it with what is now the heavy shotgun being in the game. The fact that that thing is basically a laser with a single shot. The fact you can do damage with a hammer, then immediately one pump and they're gone. It is crazy to see what we've seen out of some of these higher level players competing in these lobbies right now. And speaking of lobbies, I think we're getting ready for our very first one. Game number 1 of the day is just about upon us here. And Panda, I feel like you and I are both going to expect the same things. Game number 1, usually a little bit more frag heavy. Players are just absolutely just running after each other. You are keying into other boxes and hoping to try and get a couple eliminations. And then maybe as the day goes on, we'll see a little bit of a settle. But initially in this first game, I am expecting a lot of early fights.
See, I'll expect that from a few players.
Fair.
In my opinion, I'm thinking it's going to be a bit slower, but for the players that aren't as nervous, right? Because you have to think, these names continue to change month over month when we get into these PlayStation Cups. And for the new names that come into the space for their first time competing in a PlayStation Cup, they may not feel as comfortable. So for players like Pixovsky, like we talked about before, who is an aggressive player in this game, he will take advantage of that. There are no first game nerves for him. So for other players that have to get over those nerves and jitters, they might play a little bit slower, but we'll definitely see the pace pick up midway through.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it is going to be a day of highs and lows, if you will. You will see days where, or you will see games where we have players that are absolutely going crazy. Final circles are just apoplectic from so many different players shooting shots every left, right, and center. And other games where we will see a little bit more of that passivity. Other players I do also want to highlight here, I think this is one that you and I were talking about coming into this one, was Teeny. A player that not only qualified only playing 7 of the 10 games that they could potentially get, they had 2 victory royales on that and averaged 6 eliminations. Now, that's a crazy stat line, but we've seen 6 eliminations before. Here's where it gets weirder, though. Average placement, 8th place. They are doing 6 eliminations a game while still getting 8th place. So this is another player I definitely want to highlight. I feel like a lot of these guys are going to show themselves in this first game, though, as that's really where the highlights are not only going to begin, but you're going to understand why we call them highlights.
Yeah, absolutely. Another player that we should talk about is Muddy Fishy. Also coming in 3rd, just under Teeny, right? Did really, really good in that, did get 2 wins to almost close out the day. It was a first, and 9th in the last 3 games of the qualifiers. So that just shows when the heat turns on, when it all counts, they show up in those moments. So I definitely expect to see some action there from Muddy Fishy, but that's not the only player. Look, there's so many talented names here in this competition, but I think it boils down to some drop spots. And I want to cover some drop spots with you all at home because this map is very, very different than what we've seen in the past. I believe there's like a season over season. So the last season of Chapter 3 into Chapter 4, Season 1, there is a reduction of about 400 to 600 chests on the map, which we know this happens in the beginning of chapters as the map begins to develop, and there's a lot less named POIs. However, what has been unique about this new Chapter 4 map is that there are way more solo spots to actually function from, which is what makes this competition so exciting to prepare for. Now, one of those players that we've talked about in the past, of course, Pixo, is going to be landing north of Brutal Bastion. Now, not only is he landing north, but he's also landing at the highest peak just north of Brutal Bastion. So it's an easy POI to clean through, take out as a solo player, and then you have the opportunity to either look north, take shots at the players that could be potentially landing at the gas station or the other POI close by, or you just go straight over to Brutal Bastion because there are launch pads all over the icy area up north. So the mobility is not lacking, to say the least. So much for them to use, especially for an aggressive player like Pixovsky.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, it takes my heart just a little bit here. This is actually my personal drop spot, as it has been for the entire chapter so far here. I found this very early on and went, this is not a POI, is it? Okay, cool. I'm just going to utilize it, especially considering there's a gas station right next to it. So if you're able to get a vehicle and get into the zone, if you even have a south pulling zone, it is going to be absolutely huge. Crazy thing is, though, like you said, it is only something that you can do as a solo. This is very hard a spot to try and drop. Mata is also going to be dropping with Pixo here, which is going to make it rather competitive, but it's probably not the most competitive spot that we have got dropping so far here. Faulty Splits seems to be the hottest commodity I have ever seen. It seems like we have so many players here today, a predicted at minimum 5 that are going to be dropping on top of that. So in moments like this, what you really want to do is make sure that you're maybe not playing a solos competition, but a duos. And well, if you're looking for a duo, crazy thing, we've got a perfect place for you guys to try and do so. Want to shout out the Discord here for PlayStation yet again, as PlayStation has got a Discord that you should all join. Join the PlayStation Tournaments community Discord to find regular updates on esports events, articles, videos, and meet other players to improve your game. The PlayStation Tournaments community Discord regularly hosts play sessions, interviews with figures in the community, and other special content. So if you guys want to try and join that Discord, as you can see, it is on your screen right now. Scan the QR or go to the link that you can see, https://playst.cc/3etmpen. And again, if you guys want to go back, don't worry to pause the video, go and scan the QR and join up in the PlayStation Discord. Again, huge shout out to PlayStation for being able to not only put on this event, but do so many things with their community here, Panda, because again, this is just the tip of the iceberg for what PlayStation has been able to provide.
I mean, you're absolutely right. PlayStation continues to step up the game and support many titles, including Fortnite. So thank you to PlayStation. But it's almost time for game number 1. But before we do get into game number 1, we have to jump into a quick break. So make sure to stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Different opportunities for you all to compete in not only Fortnite, but multiple titles. So get signed up at compete.playstation.com, and maybe you could be in a commercial like that. I don't know, but that was pretty cool. Listen, it gets me so hyped to see how much support PlayStation puts forward. It's always been, my favorite console. If you ever see me out and about, you usually see me rocking the PlayStation Nikes. They're kind of my go-to shoe. Honestly, PlayStation, thank you all so much for continuing to support the community, but it is almost time here, folks, as Bass and I prep you for game number 1. But I always ask one question before we dive in, and that is, where do you think this first zone is going to go, Bass? Do you think it's going to be a north zone, south zone? You knew the question was coming.
I know it's coming, and last chapter, I had a very simple answer, which was, I just hope that it pulls to the east because it's all water, and that was my favorite thing. I was a huge water zone person just because I found it very interesting. The issue with this one is that there are not as many waters, but where I will hope that it pulls is towards the Citadel, and because that is the Citadel, which is surrounded by basically I don't want to call it a moat, maybe a lake, somewhere in between, but there are rivers throughout, and it will make for some rather interesting fights, especially considering the Citadel itself is such a very elevated POI that you're going to have battles from so many different positions. I'm not guaranteeing that it'll pull that way, but I will say this much. A lot of people would be happy considering that Anvil Square, the Citadel, and Breakwater Bay are all right next to each other. If we get a zone that pulls up there to what would be the northwest, we have very little players that really have to rotate all that far unless you are coming from somewhere like, say, Frenzy or the Faulty Splits. But at the same time, I really don't necessarily know for this first game. Usually, I don't know what it is. In Fortnite, we know that these are random zones. Whatever zone pulls first, though, get ready. We're going to see it like 6 times throughout the night. It just always ends up being that way.
No, for sure. It does seem like the first zone of the competition always is kind of a tell as to where it's going to go. But it is time here, folks, as we load into the north side. We just got done talking about it, and this is my prediction for where the day is going to start. I think this first zone is going to go up in this north icy area. And Brutal Bastion right there in the distance could be a potential hotspot changer, like you talked about. You said there was one POI that had a ton of people. I was seeing Slappy Shores had about 6 people landing there as well. So with the north side of the map, this whole icy area being less congested, we definitely could see some teams breaking off and going in that direction. But either way, folks, it is time. Game number 1 is here. Let's dive in, Bass.
Oh, I'm so ready for this one. Again, game number 1, not going to be the end-all be-all for all of our players here today, but it is a good sort of marker for what we're going to be seeing. This type of action is going to be something that you have to pay attention to. You go down early in game number 1, well, you're going to be playing recovery the rest of the day, or you can just kind of have a pop-off game number 1, and then who knows what the rest of your day will hold. All I know is that it is time to get into our first game of the day. It is game number 1 here for the PlayStation Cup in Europe, and already we are back with a familiar face and neck in here. This is another player that plays on the same team as, I believe, Pixovsky in RZ, a team that we have seen many times here on the broadcast and that we have been very excited to watch, as usually these are very high-level players, so not surprising to see them dropping very hot here in Frenzy Fields.
Yeah, definitely an interesting spot. Like we talked about, Frenzy Fields is another one that does have a few players landing there. They got 4 people, and actually, looking at what we were anticipating, I don't think Necken was originally planning on making their way over, so a bit of a change here, but either way, excited to see how it plays out.
You never really know, and again, for a lot of these drop spots, it's kind of circumstantial. If you're seeing a bunch of people drop somewhere that you were initially anticipating, maybe you pivot, go a little bit more to the outskirts of one of these POIs. Here in Anvil Square, it seems like nobody's going away from the central location, though. A couple players, looks like 3 total here, have dropped in Anvil. And again, this is kind of what we are expecting, is that in game number 1, it's going to be a lot of hesitation to these off-spawn fights. You do not want to go down early, like, unfortunately, Sat in the top left has already 5, 6 players actually already exiting out of this first game, and again, like we said, kind of detrimental to your chances here, as now you're basically getting no points. Your only chance to really get any points is going to be the recovery through the next 5 games, so you do have to be careful, especially in a place like Anvil Square, where it is a very hotly contested POI. If you do go down, like we said, it's just not going to help you out whatsoever.
Yeah, you're absolutely right here, Bass, but one thing I will say, looking at Fox loadout, this is probably exactly what I'd be going for as a solo player. The legendary Thunder Shotgun. The epic rarity of the Twin Mag SMG plus a hammer. You have everything that you need. You have the heavy hitter, you have an SMG that almost hits like an AR, to be honest, from a distance. And then, of course, you have that sweet, sweet mobility in the Shockwave hammer. And honestly, solid heals to start. One thing we do need to talk about, though, for you all at home, maybe you haven't had the opportunity to play as much this season, there's been some changes. One of those changes is augments. We now have these little tiny, essentially a perk system added to Fortnite called the augments. Now, the augments are really unique in the sense that they give you these different abilities throughout the game, whether it's being able to see future storms, getting a better shot with your first AR or the first shot from an AR, or you get things like the rushing reload, which allows you to just sprint and it'll reload your shotgun. So there are so many cool augments added to the game, so I'm excited to see how this plays out for these players.
Yeah, rushing reload has been such an interesting one for me here, especially considering that the meta, as it stands right now, is going to be what we see here with Bach, which is that a lot more players are prone to dropping their AR in favor of the Twin Mag that you had just mentioned here, because that is going to be one of the most valuable items in this game right now. You mentioned it is an absolute laser from a distance, so even if you do have only this SMG as well as the shotgun combo, it's still pretty viable. I mean, hey, listen, you gave a shout out to SBG earlier, so let's give a shout out to another one of our friends in Ben K, one of my favorite players in all of North America, in both a competitor as well as also a caster, has done a lot of breakdowns on what has been the current metas that people have been going through, and it really is this duo here. It's the shotgun and SMG, just due to trying to make sure that you can kind of keep players close and not necessarily try and take fights from a distance. It's really where that shockwave hammer has come into effect, is where you'll see players, if they're in too far of a distance, they'll just dip. They'll just use the shockwave hammer as a mobility item and get as far away as possible, and then try and reapproach later when they have a chance to keep the battles close. For right now, not a lot of battles going on. We saw a couple of players go down off of spawn, but since then, it's been rather quiet in most of the POIs. I don't suspect it to stay that way for that much longer, though, as the first storm is officially closing, and, well, none of us were really wrong, none of us were really right. A very central first zone here, as it seems to be pulling pretty much to most of the POIs.
Yeah, which is actually pretty nice. It kind of makes for an even start here for these players. But yeah, looking at that, I was about to say it might be worth dropping those impulse nades for those additional chug splashes, because one of those other perks is called the splash medic. And when you get the splash medic, every time you open up a cooler, an ammo crate, or a chest, you have an increased chance of dropping chug splashes. And obviously, as we've known from seasons past, chug splashes definitely the strongest healing utility in the game right now. But another strong augment that I really want to cover is light fingers, which makes your weapons using light ammo reload faster. And that is just one of the perks that not only makes the SMG stronger, but also makes the pistol stronger, which has been, in my opinion, one of the most underutilized weapons here in Chapter 4 so far.
Yeah, the pistol's been extremely popular for a number of reasons. Like you said, not only has it been somewhat underutilized, but also, in addition to having a light fingers perk, there is also the pistol amp perk, which is going to give you extra ammo. So imagine having what is already a very strong pistol, which is very comparable to the SMG that we were just speaking about. But not only is it comparable to that, you can get increased reload time, as well as also more ammo within your clip. That is a huge thing to have. So you'll see players sometimes pick up that pistol and keep it all the way to even the late game if they get the right set of augments here. But you never really know about the augments. Again, it is a somewhat random decision here, so you kind of just got to hope that you get the right ones. Technically, you can re-roll them, but you need gold in order to do so. So in a lobby like this, you got to hope that you can maybe find a couple of safes here and there in order to give you the correct augments, especially considering what I would believe is probably one of the most powerful augments we have seen throughout this entire thing has been aerial assist. It's the ability to redeploy even at any point throughout the game. We've seen this a lot, especially with the Shockwave hammer becoming so increasingly sort of within this meta. I think the word that I'm kind of using here is essential, if that makes sense, just due to the fact that mobility in this chapter has been so unique. We even have the chili chugs, which are technically back. So it's one of these things where movement is going to be huge here. If you are not paying attention to when you're taking these fights and at the right moment, you could be in for a bit of trouble. Speaking in for a bit of trouble, we are down about 20 players at this point, down to 80 total. And for Launcher here, as we watch them on the outskirts of Frenzy Field, it seems like they might need to try and get through a couple of fights if they want to make it into the Storm.
Yeah, listen, honestly, we were talking about the safes here and the impact across the map. It's also impacting where these players are landing. Obviously, places like Frenzy, they have one, right? They have one, maybe one other safe right outside the POI. But then you have Brutal Bastion that has 8 in total. Like, this is some serious planning that you need to do, because being able to select the exact augments that you can have is a huge advantage, especially with things like Forecast in the game. But we got to talk about something else too. We have to talk about the change to material on the map. One thing that has become much harder to do is find metal. And with metal being a priority, as it is one of the best hard materials, you kind of have to prioritize some drop spots that have it, or a rotation plan that allows you to pick some up on the way. So these players, more than ever in Fortnite history, really have to be mindful of where they're landing on this map.
Yeah, and we've seen this throughout the last couple of chapters and seasons as well. As things have continued to change, especially with Storm Surge being implemented, we've seen a scarcity of materials for players just as time has gone on. So in this chapter in particular, there really is an emphasis on making sure that you are prepared for the fights ahead. If you try and go in a little willy-nilly and, guns a-blazing, you might run into a couple of problems here or there. Speaking of problems right now, Sammy having a bit of a problem clearing out Breakwater Bay by themselves. They've got someone just on the edge of the zone here who is seemingly just sort of guarding them from moving any further, so they'll retreat actually all the way back into Breakwater Bay and kind of get prepared for what is going to be the next zone. We are 30 seconds away from closing out our first storm and kind of figure out where we go from there, because as we said, right now, not a lot of action. 5 players, make it 6 now, that have gone down since we last spoke about that feed in the top left. And again, it is due to the fact that we have a poll right now that is more or less central, so nobody really having to go too far, nobody really having to push through other players just to try and find a safe spot. So for players like Sammy and the rest of them here, they're just going to try and loot up, box up, grab a couple extra materials, because like we said, oh so valuable right now. Even if it isn't metal, grabbing some brick, grabbing some wood is going to be huge.
It is. Like, I mean, look, Sammy doing the right thing here. Had the opportunity to fight, but with the limited material, deciding to back off, go back to Breakwater Bay, and collect whatever they can here from the scraps. But I'll be real with you. The scraps is where you seem to find the most metal here in Chapter 4. So, great play on them, but we switch it over. We were just talking about the value of Brutal Bastion with safes. That's not the only value, and clearly multiple players have realized that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, Brutal Bastion, I think, is going to continue to be such a huge POI throughout the season. I think as more people start to recognize the mobility here due to the launch pads, it's going to be more and more important. The issue, you still got to get to those launch pads, and they're going to do that using the Shockwave, the Impulse. Not a bad idea, as this is going to give Zone now a chance to completely escape what would have been their attacker here, and now they might just be able to get out of Bastion altogether completely unscathed. A fantastic rotation from the player here, as they've just kind of left everybody within the POI guessing where they've moved.
Honestly, great execution with the impulse nades, because you have to be mindful, right? Because since they are different in the shockwave, you can take fall damage when you are hitting those bad boys. So you have to be super, super careful there when that comes up. But looking at the map here, it does look like we have a good spread of individuals making their way to the zone. And there's some pretty notable names already out here. It does look like Nuke is out. We also have Teeny out here early in game number 1.
Teeny, again, a very hit or miss player. This is kind of similar to what we were seeing during their actual placements as well. Although they were getting a decent amount of eliminations and keeping a high placement, it didn't necessarily guarantee them that if they were to try and go out early, it was usually due to low eliminations and kind of just trying to avoid fights altogether. But again, good thing for them is they still have many games to go from here. This is only the first of a total 6 we will be playing on the day. So we've got a little bit of time. And, well, speaking of time, looks like it's time for everybody to start rotating here. The second zone has officially popped, and this one a little bit more central than the last one, but it does not mean that it's going to be easy for everyone to get to, especially for our players outside of Brutal Bastion. They're probably going to try and use those launch pads and get all the way out, because now they also got to start getting some tags. The Storm Surge officially popping up a warning here, and again, Storm Surge also going to be pretty prominent in this chapter, as well as, again, with the increased mobility and people being kind of hesitant to take fights from a distance. If you want to get that damage, it's usually going to have to come at the cost of an elimination.
You know, it is. I'll be real with you, right? Since the values changed, we've seen a much more aggressive start to games than we had seen in chapters past, right? Now, remember, Storm Surge changed 2 seasons ago, just last summer, and since that change, we've seen players have to pick up the pace if they want to stay in it. Players like Mata here, who find themselves below the damage threshold. Now, if you are wondering what those changes were to, so before, it was 70 players had to be up in the lobby, no more, and then Storm Surge would cut off. Now it is 64. While that is only a 6-player difference, it is pretty significant, because when you go to 4th zone, right, because that one was 3rd zone, you go to 4th zone, it used to be just still 70 players. Now it's another 10 players knocked off that. So 54 players have to be standing, and if there are more, that surge is ticking away, and that thing is probably one of the biggest factors of players not finding the success that they anticipate.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of what it is at this point, is that you do have to be very well aware. There are many factors you have to focus on in these early games. It is getting your materials that you need. It is getting the tags to avoid the Storm Surge. And it is also just rotating into the zone in a place that is not going to be too hotly contested, because otherwise you get into a situation here like Trabzon is finding themselves in, where they are just being shot from every which angle around them as they are just trying to edge their way into the zone and out of the storm. Could be a problem for them as they are running low on builds, but it does not matter if you can one-shot your opponent and send them packing. Trabzon, before I can even blink, has found themselves with the damage necessary for the Storm Surge threshold.
Yeah, look, all it takes is one elimination sometimes to flip that threshold into your favor, and sure enough, that's what we saw there. But now, Tiger plays, just making it into the edge of zone, does end up taking quite a bit of pressure as well as surge damage. Finds himself 90 damage below, is going to need to connect the shot here soon if he wants to stay alive. He's looking left, right, and center, not finding any players exposed here, and that's what it comes down to. But it looks like potentially another player close by may be thinking the same thing, may say, hey, listen, I need to get some damage, and unfortunately, Tiger Plays is the victim.
Yeah, you can see that they were getting really aggressive, and it's honestly for a good reason. When you've got no health items on you, your only option at that point is to get the tags. You can't play passively. You can't try and reserve yourself, or unfortunately, you're probably going down. Traps in here, though, they actually have a perfect position. Yes, they do have to make the rotation, and they're going to use the Shockwave Hammer to do that right now. They're running into a bit of issue, though. Not necessarily the best rotation with the Shockwave Hammer, as now they have found themselves needing to wait for it to reload, while they also have a player in front of them who is trying to get some tags as well. And honestly, can you blame them? 66 players still up here in game number 1 as we are rotating through our third zone. Trabzon does look like they're going to be able to escape this time. I believe it was Gotson, the game on the left side, that was taking shots at them, and as they have rotated further in, they should have a little bit of safe room to work for right now. But again, they're not safe quite yet. With only 10 builds total and 3 mini pots on them, they need to try and find some more materials as well as some more health ups if they want to go for a long run in this first game.
Yeah, survival's the key here, folks. While eliminations are important, and they are 2 points per elimination, placement point always, unless you're Pixo, let's be honest, always will be heavier for you in the long run. So focusing on placement, staying alive, and letting those eliminations come to you, that's basically the name of the game if you want to find yourself at the top of the leaderboard. Now, looking at the players that are remaining, I'm actually intrigued. Look at what Box swapped. Swapped that twin mag SMG we were talking about before for a gray assault rifle. Interesting change, especially considering the damage output is about the same, but the fire rate on that twin mag SMG is just much higher.
Not only is the fire rate better, but it also seems like the aim's just a little bit more precise. We've seen a lot of criticisms of the AR here in this chapter, and it's for a good reason. In many chapters past, it has been a very powerful AR to use, but in this one, not necessarily as much. It's not a poor weapon to use by any stretch of the imagination. You can absolutely get some eliminations with it, but it's just going to be a little bit more difficult. You have to sort of get a correct tempo to your shots, if that makes sense. Make sure you're not firing too quickly. Make sure you're not firing too sort of haphazardly, or it's going to come back to bite you. Speaking of come back to bite you, Trabzon continuing to take fights, but it will not come back to bite them. Rather, the aggressor who continues to fight what has been one of our top fraggers throughout this game. Not only have they now found themselves some health items, they have found themselves exiting out of game number 1. I was going to give them more compliments. Unfortunately, I cannot, as they have now gone down, as well as their aggressor. Guts in the game goes away, and all of a sudden, we are seeing players drop like flies.
Yeah, look, again, the effects of the Storm Surge changes that we were just talking about. Players have to be more aggressive. They have to look to connect those shots, and they look, honestly, with some success, because when players are weak like that and they're rotating in late, it basically spells doom for them. Because when you're in, especially in Europe, over every other region, if you find yourself rotating late, you're going to get caught by these players that made their way in early.
I feel like this is something we have talked about so many times within the meta here. Is just Europe being so strategic in the ways that they play. I mean, we've even seen this in other competitions within Fortnite before. Even the FNCS Invitational, we saw that at the very end with what was a play that I feel like we will know for many, 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 many years to come. So the point is, at this point, is you do have to be very careful when you are in a game like this, especially in the first one, where players are trying to sort of set themselves ahead of the pack. Like we mentioned, 6 total games on the day, but if you can get a decent amount of eliminations, get a good placement within the first game, you can kind of just rest throughout the rest of them. You don't necessarily need to have that pop off. You can kind of just work off the momentum that you have built already. And for a lot of these players who are making it this far within game number 1, that's probably their objective here. Don't necessarily frag out. Don't necessarily get too aggressive. Just wait until you can get into those final couple of circles, get yourself a couple eliminations along the way, and then, well, you should have at least enough points to be able to play comfortably. Speaking of comfortably here, it doesn't really look like anybody's comfortable within their box right now. So many players within close proximity, and, well, one part of what I had requested earlier on when it comes to the zone has been accomplished. We are at a water zone, or at least kind of a water zone. You know what? I'll take it.
Honestly, I mean, this is about as much water as you're going to see on the map, to be real with you. So, I mean, this is the definition of water zone here for this map. So, definitely kind of a win there for Bass. But now, diving in, it is Tarek FNR, obviously representing the well-known Tarek of the esports scene. But honestly, great play on their part. They realized this player was caught off guard. They were getting focused. They had to be weak. There was a good chance that fight was going to lean in their favor. Sure enough, it did. Another fight ending rapidly. Squeeze going down there. It just said within a moment, all it took was a few shots and they were out.
And again, this is going further into the meta that you and I have been continually commenting upon here, which is that players are just getting so close into each other's boxes and taking these fights from a very close proximity. Even with the AR, they're getting eliminations, but they're not doing it from a distance anymore. That is not what players are focusing on here. It is very quick with eliminations. That players are going back home within a couple of seconds due to a shotgun shot and a couple of AR or SMG shots that also tack on. So you really do have to be careful here, because if you make a single mistake, it could be the last one that you have in the game in comparison to many chapters past where you'd been able to play maybe a little bit more safely. You can escape shots like we're seeing here at a Naze, but they're not quite safe yet. They still have a ton of players within their proximity, and although they are within the half and half zone that we are about to see pop in about 15 seconds, they do need to be careful, because the one thing about being in the zone in a meta like this is that you have to be careful of everyone flying in with shockwave hammers. Yes, you are in the zone, but get prepared. It's going to get very crowded.
Yeah, and look, this is one thing that we're going to see here closely, is high ground is no longer the best position, because when the shockwave hammers are out and players are flying up, they are knocking out height almost every single time, which makes those mid to low ground layers way more effective. So when you don't have that pressure from above, it's going to make a wild difference, but not much of a difference there for PS Cup winner. Honestly, still a decent start, right? Made it into what is the end game, right? We'll see. They could come back and actually be the PS Cup winner, but only time will tell that, as Z Donner here set up for success. 8 chug splashes, got that sweet, sweet hammer, and a really nice place in zone.
No, they're doing a great job right now. Not only have they done exactly that, but they've been able to get themselves the elimination we just watched, which means they'll at least walk away with a decent amount of points here within this game due to both placement and getting an elimination. And again, just trying to set yourself on the right foot forward here. And for all of these players, though, I don't think the right foot forward is going to be as necessary as maybe having a hammer at this point. Again, for a lot of these players, they're going to need to make very quick rotations in this next zone, as everybody is going to be running towards this 6th. And honestly, you do need to be careful, like you said, if you're going to try and take the high ground here. In many metas past, the high ground has been such an important part of it, but in this one, like you said, if you try and take it too early, it can come back to bite you. Previously, I've been very I would say not controversial in my takes about this, but I always believe that if you're going to try and take high ground, I would always recommend to do it in 7th, 8th, or 9th zone. In comparison to many times past where you see players try to get it within the 6th or 7th. You do this right now, you try and take the zone, I'm guaranteeing you're getting sent straight to the floor. You're going to be in the mud with the pigs, and I guarantee it at this point. What I also guarantee is that everybody's going to get rotating. Look how many players are getting dropped to their health. Tarek almost going home here, as well as so many others in our top left. We're down to 36 players, and honestly, I think that this is just the tip of the iceberg of what is about to be an all-out brawl.
Yeah, listen, the fights are just beginning here, folks, as players are dropping left to right. Tarek is taken out there in the elimination feed, and players using this hammer to get ahead of zone. Remember, the hammer is the premier mobility item here in these final moments here, folks, and that's why you see so many players using it. Now, though, you do see that big beam of light, and that is our first place player there in the distance, which honestly can change at a moment's notice.
Yeah, it feels like right now we are just sitting on a knife's edge, kind of teetering back and forth, wondering who's going to be able to take the lead here. Because again, as good as it is to take the lead at this point, it doesn't really matter much if you get sent home due to a drop out of nowhere from the skies down to the earth below. Players continuing to try and take the high ground and just not succeeding. The volatility here is at an all-time high. It really has made this chapter so exciting to see what in so many chapters past has been almost a surefire way to guarantee yourselves points. Now here with players just smashing this hammer every 2 seconds, you never know what you're gonna find. Maybe a player in a box that you landed, blazified out of nowhere, uses their shotgun and finds their second elimination.
I mean, look, just sweet, sweet science there with the hammer, breaking into the box, finding an elimination, and now putting 2 on the board there for blazified. But so many players still standing. You see a lot of people just trying to move forward. But now as the zone gets tighter, it becomes way tougher to use that hammer. You have to be way more cautious in the way that you shoot yourself, because if you go too far, you're taking a ton of storm damage.
Oh boy, and the storm damage is going to start to get more and more lethal as time goes on here. For Zynox, they're just trying to avoid the shots that could also cause them problems. They have used the last of their used the last of their chug splash. They still do have this med mist on them, but the question is whether or not they're going to be able to even use that, as they are down to 20 health and just looking for a little bit of reprieve. They are on the high ground here, so theoretically they're in a bit of a precarious position. That is only if somebody recognizes to use the hammer, and they did. Zynox, though, not caught off guard. They recognize that they've got got a chance now to rotate using the elevation that they have found, going straight for the high ground. And honestly, at this point, they might just be able to play a little bit more passively because they have found themselves with 6 eliminations. Panda, they don't really need any more. Top 15 placement plus 6 eliminations, they have found themselves with a very solid game number 1.
Yeah, but listen, high ground is not safe anymore. We were talking about it, and that's why players have struggled up until Zone 8 to even get it, because the hammer plays such a big factor there. Fortunately, though, you saw Zynox reinforce his builds there, keeping them up in the air, and not only that, walking away now with 7 eliminations on the board, looking to make this 8 as he continues to pressure down below. And here it is, folks. We talked about the Twin Mag SMG being the replacement AR, and this is why. Look at the pressure coming down from high ground. It's so difficult to combat this, especially with the fire rate that we see there.
Yeah, it's the fire rate that's really making the biggest difference here, because if you can just sneak a bullet or two through somebody's builds when they're not paying attention, not building quickly enough, that is when you're going to be able to really get on some extra damage and start to make players panic. And that's the big thing. In these very final moments, you have to be clutch. Speaking of clutch, Zynox got to make it very clutch. Hammer rotation here, as they've got no more builds on them. They sneak on top of everybody else, and now they're just trying to get a vantage point, because with only 4 of their players besides them remaining, they need to be careful. The high ground still very much a factor, but they can smack them right down below. Again, this hammer, so many different uses, whether that is canceling mobilities for others or making mobility yourself. It can be used in a number of different ways, and Zynox using it to get even more eliminations. Kai Donner, though, going to exit out here of game number 1, and we are down to our top 3 as Tobco tries to look for the high ground.
He tries to hold it, but can as he gets knocked out. Very few builds remain. Gets an elimination here, but now the 1v1 to finish off the day. Topco holding down the high ground, does build up a little bit, tries to heal for a moment, but the hammer play comes out. He does find the other player in Storm and finishes it off as Zynox goes down, and Topco takes our first win of the day.
We weren't really paying enough attention to Topco, in my opinion, here, because he finishes off with 10 eliminations total. That is a very large amount, especially when we're looking at players like Kai Donner and going, oh, yeah, he's in a great position. We're looking at so many different players and going, Zynox, you might just be able to take this one. And then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, just the flip of a switch, and all of a sudden, the hammer is going to drop you straight down to earth and humble you just a little bit, as at the very end, 10 eliminations going to our first place player. They take the victory royale home, and, well, when we talk about starting off the day on the right foot forward, I don't think there's a better foot forward than what we just saw.
No, that is by definition the best way to play it. Literally 20 points just in eliminations alone. Ooh, what a great start here. But look, there was so much action that we got to unpack here, because it was game 1 and probably some of the most aggressive plays that we've seen thus far. And for those players that were nervous, like we talked about, right? We saw them getting caught off guard. They get into fights and unfortunately found themselves going down. But it was such a good game indeed.
It was a fantastic game, and it started off already with some action here. Trabzin, a player that I feel like we're going to be saying a lot about them here tonight, already getting eliminations off the bat, and then we get to see a little bit of an example of what we mean when we say the Storm Surge is pushing players into aggressiveness. The edge of the zone here almost always hotly contested, and if you weren't paying attention, like turning your back when in a box with another player, you're getting sent home. Even through the first half of this first game, Panda, we could already tell the aggression here tonight is going to be something different.
It is. And look, man, we just watched what is the definition of Hammerville. It is like hammer time now. I'm going to be real with you, because the Shockwave Hammer, by far the strongest item, period, in the game right now. And for good reason, as you saw players getting sent into the storm, sending other players into the storm, rotating with it, doing crazy damage, and of course, finishing it off for Topco, getting knocked down, and the other player in Zynox getting sent in the storm because of his own hammer. So 50 total points to finish off there, 30 points in placement, 20 in eliminations, and honestly, it's a good way to start the day.
It's a good way. I'd say it's a great way almost to an even degree here. Like, this is insane to see that the drop-off just between first, second, and then third and fourth is insane here. From 50 points to 41, 2 very solid starts. And as much as 28 should be one of the most solid starts we see, it only gets you third place as it stands right now. So it really just goes to show pop-off potential is one thing. Popping off just in general, though, is going to be a necessity here for the PlayStation Cup in Europe. If you want a chance to be able to take home that $2,000 first place prize, you really need to be able to hang with the best of them. And the best of them right now are putting up double-digit eliminations. I cannot believe that the aggressiveness we saw in game number 1 not only was, well, as aggressive as it was, but it paid off for so many players. So many players did not seem like sort of I would say, interrupted, let's say, by the aggression
Yeah.
here, as much as it was just kind of part of their plan. They keep on riding the waves, and they seem fine no matter what the circumstances are.
Yeah, and I think, look, like we've talked about in the past, and we even talked about it today, you have to let those eliminations come to you, right? You can start off the game with maybe 2 eliminations through the early and mid game, but the end game, if you make it there, that's when the eliminations almost present themselves to you if you play it right. We saw a perfect example. We saw a player shockwave into another player's box and then just pick up an elimination right there. It's literally moments like that otherwise in the mid game and early game, you're not going to find yourself getting as easily. So play for the end game, wait for those eliminations to come to you, and take home that victory royale, because 30 points is way too valuable to pass up.
Again, this is what makes it so interesting for me when it comes to solos in this mode, is that first place is always so valuable. The fact that there is a 5-point difference between first and second cannot be overstated. I mean, just to sort of give you guys an understanding of that one, again, elimination tier, 2 points on the day. Just to be able to catch up from second to first, you need to have at least 3 eliminations to make up that gap. Well, if you also want to make up that gap, you can try and do it here in game number 2. It is time to get back into the action, Panda. And again, this is a very important one. As much as we say the first is huge to try and put yourself on the correct path, this is where if you haven't put yourself on the correct path, you're going to kind of be trying to scramble for shortcuts the rest of the day. So, can they find themselves some recovery for some of our players that we didn't mention in this first game? Only time will tell. Game number 2 just about underway as we hop off the battle bus.
Hey, listen, folks, game number 2, if it's anything like game number 1, we're in for a special treat, because that was honestly precision gameplay for these Fortnite players. And realistically, I can see the beginning of this game going even a little bit slower than that last game did. While a lot of players struggled with Surge, I think there's still a little bit of nerves in the lobby. I even saw it there in the final moments where these players are like, man, I just don't know how to navigate this new way to play the game. Because, again, traditionally, Chapter 3, Chapter 2, Chapter 1, you played for high ground, right? That's what you had to think about. So when you made it into those final moments, it's like, okay, my game plan is high ground. Now, with the Shockwave Hammers and what we just saw there, you can't play high ground. And so many players are going to be taken off by that. So they're going to go into game 2 and probably be like, okay, now I need to figure something out different, which could cause more mistakes. Because, listen, if you practice one way and then you get into the game and you have to do something else, you could end up turning that trajectory of success that you originally had planned for yourself.
Again, and it's also, for me, not only are we seeing a high ground change in terms of what has been, a successful path forward in the last couple of different chapters, it's also, for me, how different this map really is in comparison to chapters of the past here. In my opinion, it kind of feels like there's a lot more things just sort of in between. Yes, the POIs may have a little bit less loot in them and a little bit less materials, but that's because there are so many different things that are in between all of these different spaces. Speaking of in between here, 2 of our front runners just battled it out. Not sure if you saw them top left. Pixovsky taking out Teeny. What was our second place player from the qualifiers has now found 2 early exits through 2 of our first games. We talk about recovery. Unfortunately for them, they're going to have to throughout the rest of this day, as I don't really know how you're going to be able to survive from a first 10 elimination here in our second game.
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough indeed. Listen, when you find yourself going down early like that, it's hard to come back from, especially 2 games in a row. So you're going to have to make some changes. Now's your chance to do it. But for Zynox, who came in second place in this last game, also struggling here in the early parts of this game, as 19 health is not going to be enough. Zynox, unfortunately, going back to the lobby early in game number 2.
Oh boy, and that's a really big turnaround here. Zynox, one of our front runners on the entire day now, is going to have to really rest on what has been a, again, good game number 1, a fantastic game number 1. But now the question is can game number 1 be good enough to be split in half through 2 games and still be able to keep them at the top of our leaderboard? I mean, only time will tell. There's still a chance that a lot more upsets will happen here in the second game. We already saw it with Teeny, so why not happen to maybe a couple other of our front runners on the night? But we don't really quite know yet, as it is still just getting through our first zone. A little bit of a a different zone this time, pulling all the way to the bottom left, to the southwest of the map this time. And again, this is really big because two very prominent, actually even three prominent POIs are very far away from this now. Brutal Bastion, Slappy Shores, and Lonely Labs now all going to force players to rotate through. And here's the issue. You try and rotate through the air, and someone like Buko might just gun you down out of nowhere. Just shots flying, and that'll send them packing.
I'm going to be honest with you. That was tough.
Yeah, I'd say that.
My man felt so comfortable. He was excited. He had a Peely Plunder augment. He saw the treasure map in hand. He was just going to go get his treasure. But no, man, he got taken out 150 to 0 in like 2 seconds. And that's honestly the power of the Twin Mag SMG. We talked about it, man. That SMG is unreal. And so many weapons put out some serious damage. And if you're not careful, you're not covering yourself, unfortunately, you're going to find yourself going back to lobby just like them.
Unfortunately, this is what we've been talking about. The TTE, time to elimination, has been significantly lowered within this chapter, and it has made it to where if you are not careful, and even if for a moment you leave yourself exposed, somebody is going to take some shotgun shots. Really, I would say more it's going to be that SMG or the pistol that they're going to use to just hit you with shot after shot after shot after shot, bullet after bullet, and it will drain you of your health so quickly that when you start to realize that you are getting shot, it's a little bit too late. So, again, you really do have to be careful as it stands within this chapter. And you've seen this already, even through the first couple eliminations here. Two of our frontrunners already going down within a couple of seconds in Zynox and Keeney here. And so if they are susceptible to early exits out of these games, so are you. So for our players here today, please play cautiously. I know the first game was rather aggressive, but as the time goes on, like you and I were predicting, I hope that it gets a little bit more passive so that players can maybe remain within these games just a little bit longer.
Yeah, listen, you want to try to stay alive. Realistically, that's the only goal you should have, right? Let the eliminations happen as they come, but stay alive. And unfortunately, with the talent just as equally set as we've seen in this lobby, it's going to be tough. There's no way to call one player over another finding success when you see second place and another top 10 player being taken out here in the first 2 minutes of the game.
At a certain point, you kind of just got to sit back and go, how? The question really just kind of comes down to how on earth are you supposed to either A, combat it, or B, how are you even supposed to react to any sort of battles like this? For a lot of these players, it is just kind of straight up trying to avoid players. I don't think that Newton recognizes, though, that this is not a completely uncontested spot. They will get themselves a decent amount of health very quickly here as they're going to try and heal on up, but drained up all of their shield and now drained up their chances here in this second game. And the fights aren't even done yet. Buko, a player that we already saw get an elimination, has found themselves a second one and now potentially a third. And Snows seems to know that. They're retreating straight up to the high ground as they want none of this smoke.
Wait, I think Snow actually ended up taking that elimination.
No.
So he actually was able to claim those elimination points, and now he's just playing on the back foot here a little bit. He doesn't want to get involved here. He knew that that player was going to be super aggressive based on the actions of what he was doing just in that fight. So honestly, if you're Snows, you're just trying to stay alive. You're trying to play a little bit more patient.
He did a good job also of scaring him off. We thought Buko was maybe going to try and take the attack here. It looks like they just kind of looted up, were able to take everything that they need from the previous player and kind of decided to move on from there. A little bit of materials left around for Snows here, but looks like they're not necessarily going to need it. Something that we also haven't spoken about a lot here has been the Red Eye AR, and it's something that is both valuable for a number of different reasons. Not only has it been valuable due to the fact that it is a decent weapon here that has been able to give you so many different abilities to see from a distance here, as the only other weapon that we've been able to see from a distance has been the DMR, and it's not very popular within the current meta. But the other reason that I find this a very interesting weapon is that there's a lot of augments based on ARs, and we've been seeing that more and more increasingly throughout this chapter, is that augments really are something that players are trying to rely on more and more. There are certain ones that are super powerful. Good example would be something like First Assault. First shot out of your AR is going to do extra damage. So if you've got something like a Red Eye where it's got better precision and you can shoot from a distance, those are the moments where maybe taking a fight from a little bit further out actually makes some sense in comparison to what we've been seeing with many players focusing on the SMG and shotgun close-range battles meta in this current chapter.
Yeah, I mean, look, and not only that, like Rifle Recycle's another good one as well. So remember, any weapons using medium ammo have a chance not to consume ammo, which in a stacked lobby like this, every shot counts. So having an augment like that, it kind of gives you ammo, essentially, in those ARs is huge. So I'm excited to see how these players are going to be able to use that to their advantage. Will they be able to use it? Will they can actually opt to use it? Or will we see it like Imkez here, using the SMG, opting away from, while it does have an AR, let me rephrase that, opting away from the shotgun. So, interesting play. Could be because they couldn't find a shotgun, but I think it's more likely that they were said, you know what, the SMG is too good right now. It might just be worth for me to use my excellent aim to get involved with these weapons.
Hey, listen, I don't blame them. The only issue for them will be, what if they do run into a shotgun user who is rather competent in the ways that they play? Similar to M4X here, Max coming through and taking out, again, another player we've had our eyes on. Kai Donner going home, and that was enough to scare off Trabzon. So if you can scare off Trabzon, I think you're doing something right.
Yeah, I'll agree. Look, if you're taking these players out quick, like, honestly, good for you. Squeeze, though, listen, Squeeze. Remember, we tuned in with Squeeze.
Mm-hmm.
They had 1 point on the board when we tuned in last. They have 1 point now. But, to be clear, that 1 point they had was in the end game. So, number one, there were so many players left in those final moments that, unfortunately, they couldn't really put too many points on the board. But number two, they got jumped on and caught off guard. So that means we really didn't get to see the potential of Squeeze. So that could change here as they continue to move forward here in game number 2.
You never really know. Again, game number 2 been full of surprises so far. A couple of our front runners going down early. But again, this is why you've got to be so careful here in the PlayStation Cup, is that a lot of these players are the sort of up-and-coming. They are the next generation of Fortnite players. So for a lot of these guys, you know, certain days, if they've got the clutch, they've got the clutch, and they're just going to absolutely just aggress you no matter what circumstances. And you really do have to be prepared for that. So that's what makes these all the more exciting for me, personally, because again, Panda, you and I have seen so many different things throughout this Fortnite circuit, the sort of universe that has been encompassed here in terms of Fortnite competitive, and the PlayStation Cup is one of the most interesting ones to sort of see, like I said, that upcoming generation, the next guys up who are truly such incredible players, and they show it in moments like that, where it goes from, okay, this is not a bad attack, to, oh, they're gone. They're sending somebody back to the lobby, and you have no idea what to do about it. And so far, that's been pretty much every elimination that we've witnessed here has been just a jaw-dropping display of skill as these players continually battle against each other. Speaking of battling, the battle's going to have to start getting a little even more aggressive than before, because we got 75 players remaining, and we're getting close to that third zone.
Yeah, we are. We're getting closer and closer here, as Surge is going to be a factor if roughly 9 players don't go down. Because that's what it's going to take. 9 players have to get eliminated. And at the pace that we're seeing so far, it doesn't look like it's going to happen in time.
I don't think so here. The good thing is, though, maybe we'll still be able to see a couple of fights as a result of that. Topco, a player that we've talked about a lot here, has already found themselves seemingly in a precarious position. They do have Chillick Splashes on them, and they do have these big pots, which are going to be huge for them to be able to heal back on up. The issue for them, they've got 2 minutes to try and rotate into zone, and there is the Storm Surge warning. Something we knew was going to happen, but something we weren't sure when exactly it was going to start to get these players a little bit wary. You can see, as soon as that pops up on their screen, everybody kind of just does a double take, looks around, and goes, uh-oh, is it time to fight?
Hey, listen, if we know what Topco did in the first game, right, they're going to be patient, right? 0 eliminations on the board this far into the game means that they weren't going for early game elims in that game 1 victory royale. So those 10 eliminations that came most likely came to them in those final moments like we were talking about. So Topco realizes that, going to use the hammer to continue to try to rotate, but unfortunately going to find themselves getting caught off guard. Lots of players close by. Does need to be careful here and heal back up as soon as possible because they have no more charges left in their gravity hammer.
Well, they get 1 back, but that's not necessarily going to do them all too much justice, especially considering the fact that this is a far rotation for this player as it stands right now. Last time we checked on the map, it was a little bit more central. Now it has gone all the way to the west. Shattered Slabs, the only POI still within our zone. So for Topco, they got to be careful here. There's 3 or 4 players surrounding them, and even on top of that, as you can see in the bottom right of the map, there's more players even waiting further into the zone. So they got to be very careful here, and here is why. Just shots firing out of the air, draining them of all of their shield. shield and even a little bit of their white health as well. They do have the Chug Splashes to heal back on up, but again, this is probably going to be the end of their Chug Splashes, and they still have more rotations to make, along with everybody around them. Left Rooney, Dot Fishy, all of them also still having to make this rotation, but rather than make the rotation, Panda, they are opting just to get that Storm Surge damage instead. They're not even in the zone. They don't seem to care, though. They're still going to take shots.
Yeah, listen, not only they're taking shots, but they're staying in the storm. So, yes, I understand that Surge is a factor, right? Being above Surge, even if it's only 1 damage above, is still above Surge, so it means you don't have to worry about it too much, right? But realistically, being in Storm does almost just as much damage. So, fighting in Storm is like dealing with Storm Surge, which now, Naze, who we just saw fighting in Storm, dealing with that damage, now dealing with Storm Surge, because guess what? That fighting wasn't enough.
It really is not enough, and unfortunately, this is what we've been seeing time and time again, is that you need to be so careful with when you choose your aggression, because the other thing about it is that, okay, cool, if you're trying to aggress some player from the side, that's great, but if you're doing that with other players, and all of a sudden the player that both of you guys had been shooting after, all of a sudden comes through and eliminates one of the two of you, oh great, that's even more Storm Surge threshold you now have to catch up on, and that's something we literally just saw there. Tabson was just getting absolutely shot from all the way out, and then all of a sudden, they end up fighting Dot Fishy, and boom, it's quick elimination. Dot Fishy was deciding to stay within the storm just to try and get those shots, and it came back to bite them. And again, that is so much of what we have seen here today has been players making some rather rash decisions that come back to end up being detrimental to their chances, and it's why it makes it so interesting, especially considering we're very early on to the chapter. This is one of the first competitive events we've been able to see within this chapter, and that is why we're seeing so many weird rotations, so many weird attacks here. These players are still trying to figure out what is going to be the most viable solution, and for a couple of them, those viable solutions, sort of experimenting to find them, is going to come at the cost of getting eliminated and getting sent home.
You're absolutely right. I mean, look, we were just seeing Naze there, who fought in Storm, came in, was using the Bush Warrior augment to heal up in the bush there. So that was kind of cool. Good to see here, because unfortunately, we don't necessarily know what players have what augments, but when you see it active, you can kind of get an idea. But Naze is a top 15 player going into game 2, so definitely still someone we got to pay close attention to, and I even see them lighting up the elimination feed there just a moment ago, so that is important. But also what's important, in our top 10, we have 4 players already out, so that means only 6 of our top 10 are still here in game number 2.
Yeah, speaking of which, you were just talking about how Kaz was able to find themselves a decent elimination. They do it none other than Topco, and that's, again, another one of those front runners just going out so early. We're not even to our top 50 yet. More than half the lobby remains, and Naze is not going to be one of them. Again, even the players that are showing themselves to be strong contenders early in these games are falling victim to just over-aggression and being exposed at the wrong moments. Again, this is what has made this chapter, and really this map in particular, so interesting to me, is even here, we're near a POI, I should say, but we're not in the POI. There are still so many elevation changes. There are so many things to hide behind. The trees all around, these different cliffs that you have to try and scale, and as a result, it is making these fights all the more precarious every time that you enter into them. A player who seems to understand this precariousness and is trying to play, I would say, even less aggressive than in their first game is going to be Pixovsky here. Pixovsky, I think, exited around, I want to say, 15th to 20th in our last game, and in this one, they are having none of that. Shotgun shots from a distance, taking out players for eliminations already, and I think they're just getting started. There's a 5th on top of that. Pixo with a massive turnaround here in game number 2.
Look, honestly, we should have never doubted Pixo. Pixo went down early last game. We were kind of like, oh man, will that continue to happen? Nope. 6 eliminations on the board as he just walks into the box and picks up another one here in game number 2. But looking at the map here, this is crucial to talk about. So many players are congested on the side of the zone that Pixo finds himself. While he wants to use that hammer, he wants to progress forward, unfortunately, players could potentially try to hold him as he's in the air, because remember, that is when he's going to be the most vulnerable. He's a great fighter, and every time we see him in a fight, he's most likely winning. But when you're hammering, unfortunately, that's basically when you're your weakest. So you have to be mindful of that. You have to make sure you're rotating at the right times, and you kind of have to hope that you're not on a congested side, because looking at this edge, there are just so many players there that I don't think anybody realizes how they can actually move safely.
Again, I was just about to mention that. I have a feeling a lot of the people viewing right now are probably looking at that and going, oh, okay, so that's the zone, right? No, that was Shattered Slabs, which is literally about as far as you can get away from the zone itself. So that is why we're seeing this massive rotation from so many different players. They hammer, you can hear it thundering around as everybody has to use it. For players like Asco, though, they got to be kind of careful here. They're out of charges, and they've got a player directly underneath them. And if that player has any charges left, they can not only start to arrest them, but destroy the entire structure that they had just built. Again, this is why builds have been so difficult to come by within this meta, is that players will literally destroy your builds without a second hesitation, and there goes 40, 30, 50, 60 material that you have now spent, that you've been grinding to try and build up. So if you're not careful and you don't use your materials correctly, you're unfortunately going to run out of them. Speaking of run out of them, zone down to 10, and it does not matter! They're getting aggressive, the 180, and immediately send their opponent packing.
What a shot there from Zone. The saving grace there to keep him in the game for just a little bit longer, but these other players saying, no, we're not having it. I don't care if you have an elimination there. No, we're not going to let you stay. But no, as I say that, finds himself a bush, and he has the Bush Warrior augment, but it's not going to matter. Tariq FNR, not Tarek, but Tariq FNR picking up the elimination there. But looking at this wide shot, does look like quite a few players like Pixo have made their way closer and closer to the zone.
And this is an interesting zone. Hopefully we can pull this up in just a second to show you guys, because initially, pulling south, we're seeing the zone go further south, but as you can see in the bottom right, it's actually ended up staying closer towards Slattered Shabs here. And it has been a little bit of a different thing of where the zone continues to pull in rather weird ways, but this is the first one where I feel like no one's really got to rotate. We've got, I'll call it 5 to 6, maybe 10 to 20 players that are just barely on the outside of this zone, and at that, they are barely on the outside of that zone. Really, only players like Rack and Stino here are going to have to make a long rotation, where everybody else is within the zone and can kind of just play this one passively. So maybe for the first time all day here, we might actually see a little bit of a settle down in comparison to the aggression that we've been seeing throughout.
Yeah, I mean, look, at some point you kind of have to settle down here, play this smart, especially as the material begins to dwindle. But it doesn't matter for Pixo, because guess what? He's so confident, he continues to press any players that get close by.
Honestly, he's making up for what was a first game that I feel like both you and I were a little bit underwhelmed by. We saw him get into the top 20 and went, okay, you know, not too bad, but it's definitely not satisfactory to him. So the fact that he has 7 eliminations and we are just barely halfway through the zones, Pixo, pop off, my guy. I'd love to see it.
Hey, listen, I'd love to see it too. 7 eliminations is no easy task, and we're just getting into the end game, meaning that this could easily be a 15-plus elimination game for Pixo based off of his track record. Remember, in his qualifying games, he won a game with 27 eliminations. Yes, you heard that correctly. In a solo qualifying match for the PlayStation Cup, he won with 27 eliminations.
My brain can't wrap itself around that one at this point here. I think it's fallen out of my ear and is slowly rolling down the hill outside of my house, just trying to understand the information that you have just, thrown onto me here. The good thing, though, is that I don't have to process the information right now. I can wait until the very end of the game, and we're getting closer to that. 37 players still remain as it stands right now, and with a very long rotation for everybody here, we're playing ping pong with the zones as it stands here, going far south, going far north, going far south, just back and forth and back and forth. But all that really means is that if you don't have a hammer right now, get moving, put your running shoes on, and hope that maybe you can sprint to the other side.
Hey, listen, you better start sprinting fast here or hammering fast, because lots of players already finding themselves ahead of zone here, and that's what you need to do. Get yourself ahead, look back, target any of these other players that are flying in the air, because that's where you're going to be able to pick up some pretty easy eliminations, and that's what we see him here from Bayoxty. We see him looking for elims, unfortunately going to get knocked out by another player's hammer, but gets ahead. He is going to find himself running low on material. 200 builds is not a lot to work with, especially when it is only wood left. So a refresh is going to be needed if he wants to continue to survive here through the next few zones.
And I feel like every player we're going to tune into here is going to have the exact same problem. They're going to start running low on builds. Maybe not for Tariq, as you can see him all the way at the high ground again. And we've been critical of high ground takes early on within these games, and I don't think I'm necessarily going to change it here, but maybe in the second game there could be a little bit more strategy. We did see a player utilize the high ground going into the 9th zone last time, but as you can hear, the hammer just thunder all around, smacking against the ground. I don't necessarily think it's going to stay for all too much longer. A player who might stay in this one for a bit longer, though, is going to be Pixovsky. They were one of the players who were able to pick off another one through the air as everybody rotated. They're now on to 8 eliminations, and they're looking for a 9th. You predicted 15 eliminations. I'm starting to believe it just more and more and more as time goes on, especially considering a Pixo with pixel-perfect rotations. Try to say that 5 times fast. 22 players remain as it stands right now, and Pixo one of them. Let's see if maybe they can even make it further into these zones.
Yeah, look, smart play on his part. You see him immediately go for the tree. The only existing material left here, but unfortunately another player actually going to shoot it out. Smart play on their part. They don't want him to have the material if they're not going to have it. So instead, he just takes some shots towards it. But Pixo taking some shots as well as he begins to hammer forward. You see all the hammers coming out, and a lot of them are not only breaking builds, but breaking what is left of the material that could be farmed. So this could be tough for players like Pixo who find themselves on their last few hundred builds here in the last 2 zones.
And they got to be very careful. I still feel like a couple hundred builds is going to be better than what is comparison to many players that we've tuned into to where they basically have nothing left. Good example here, Buko is down to just their not even 20 builds left here. They're going to have to try and refresh, and they will actually get one here. Buko takes out another player and gives themselves a chance. So they're going to go for the refresh, though. No, they opt to rotate with the zone instead, not recognizing maybe how low they are in materials. They'll try and go to the high ground, but this is a rather interesting play because the issue is they get just shot out of the air from the high ground here. They've got no way to rebuild it back. They're just at the mercy of the players around them. Buko scrambling as everything turns to ashes in front of their sight. Shotgun shot maybe can get them back into this, but they are scrambling to find some sort of recovery. Shot from a distance, trying to escape, and they cannot. Another elimination as more players exit out of here in game number 2.
Yeah, this is tough here, folks. Again, every player we've seen try to take high ground immediately loses it to the hammer, and it just happens yet again as new plays going up for it is going to be able to take high ground for the time being. Does reinforce it here. Now it's just about applying pressure, staying up, and hoping that nobody breaks it out. But no, of course, as I say it, new plays almost loses that high ground to a hammer play from below. But oh, there it is. Unfortunately, like we talked about, high ground is just not viable anymore here, folks. So you have to be more mindful and careful, especially with the limited material left in your inventory.
Oh, it's especially a problem when you don't have any health items on you. Small pots are not going to be enough because you will take fall damage when your structures are dropped out underneath you unless you've got a hammer like Pixo has here. The issue for them, though, is they're getting shot out of zone. They have a little bit to work with here, and they do have health items, but will they get a chance, a little bit of reprieve to maybe try and use them? They might not even need them. A siphon's going to be enough from an elimination. And with 2 players left, Pixo in a 1v1. Will they redeem themselves from their loss in the first game? Only time will tell. Hammers to the skies, looking for a shot, charging into the box. They need 1 more elimination to total off at 12. Can they find it? Just waiting for their moment. I can feel the anticipation, and so can Pixovsky, trying their hardest to get into this box, but cannot find a moment. Could this be the one? Looking around and actually getting shot instead, but they'll finish it off. F now looking for the angle, but Pixo finds it instead. Shotgun to the sky in a victory royale in game number 2.
24 elimination points, 30 points in placement. What a comeback game there for Pixovsky. He continues to show us why he is a PlayStation Cup regular and champion. So honestly, great game number 2 there from Pixovsky. I'm not surprised to see a comeback, especially after the performance we saw in game number 1, which was definitely out of the norm for him. But look, it's only been 2 games. So much is still yet to unfold. I mean, like, these are going by lightning fast because it really has been nonstop action, Bass.
I don't know what it is. We continue to have, like, we've seen competitions in the past, you and I, where it gets down to the 9th zone. It's not just in the 9th zone, but we're literally having it shrink to where there's nobody left. In this one, we are seeing action out the gates here. Even players like Max, I mean, this is 30 seconds into the game, and they're already finding eliminations on other players. I mean, this is just what we're going to see here tonight, is that randomness is not the right word to use. It is instability and just chaos all the way through. Even our front runners are seemingly getting caught off guard by some of the craziest plays we've ever seen.
Yeah, I'll be real. Like, there's just no stability in what is going on. There's no predictability. More often than not, these players are very, very good at having kind of a base understanding of what could happen in these games. but time and time again we see why that's just not the case here. Zone thought he was comfortable in a bush, didn't work out. Player on the wall. You have Pixofsky jumping into box left, right, and center. And while aggression doesn't always work for him in the finals, it sure worked for him here in game number 2.
I mean, this final play out of Pixofsky here was so incredibly smart. Recognizes where these players are, and all they need to do is just wait for their perfect shot. They switched off the shotgun maybe for about a moment to try and get into a box, but otherwise, you could see it. They were waiting for their singular shot. They knew if they could hit it, they'd be able to walk away with the victory royale, and well, here we are, VR in their pocket, as well as some extra points, which might just be able to launch them up the leaderboard here, because this is something you and I have been waiting for. Game number 1, a leaderboard that got set. Game number 2, half those players didn't even make it out of the second zone.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a huge change there from game number 1. Like we said before, it was 4 players out of the top 10 didn't even make it into, like, the first half of the game. So that means that probably more players fell, and there's going to be some huge shakeups as we get into the leaderboard here, because realistically, I don't think our top player is going to be who we think it is. I think there could be some pretty serious changes for that leaderboard. But before we get into it, man, do you think Pixofsky can continue that dominant performance, or do you think somebody's going to rival him and challenge him a little bit, like we didn't see him get challenged there?
I want to say Tabco is going to probably try to make a little bit of a resurgence here. After our first game where they looked very solid, it felt like maybe they were able to get, ahead of the pack, if you will. But I still kind of have faith in Pixofsky. The big thing that you and I said is that not only has he been a consistently good player throughout every PlayStation Cup, including in qualifiers he did well, it was is he on the day? Is really the big question. Is just whether or not he's able to recognize that he needs to last to these later zones. Because other times we're seeing him go out, right off the bat. Other games, we see him find his way all the way to the end, and once you get him into, let's say, the top 20, you have a guarantee that he's getting at least 5 eliminations. So, Pixo, if you're listening right now, take a deep breath, play this one a little bit more carefully, because you have a huge start to the day. If you can kind of just have, maybe one more game even half as epic as the last one, you're probably going to be walking away with a second PlayStation Cup champion title.
You know what's crazy here for Pixofsky? This isn't even his first solo competition of the day.
Yeah.
He played the Solo Victory Cup earlier today, got some wins in that, did well in that, and he comes over here to the PlayStation Cup to do it all over again. And could he continue this raid? Will somebody dethrone him? Well, it's time for Game 3, and it's time for us to find out.
I gotta hope that we at least keep this one, rather interesting, if you will. I'm not gonna guarantee that we're gonna see a different outcome. I have a feeling we're starting to figure out who the front runner is on the day, and I think that all of you guys at home are gonna understand why that is the case as well. The bigger question for me, more than anything else, is whether or not we're gonna continue to see this same early game aggression. Last time, we saw players going out before everybody had even landed on the map. In this third game, I would not be surprised if it's the same old story.
Could be the same old story, could be a new story written. That's the beauty of Fortnite, because you really truly never know what is to come. Sometimes there's some consistency, sometimes there's not, but whatever the case may be, let's dive in with Bach as he goes just past the Citadel for his drop.
We haven't spoken a lot about Bach. I feel like we talked about him a lot in game number 1, and then after that, it kind of, teetered out. We didn't necessarily have as many things to comment about this player, but again, that's kind of the issue of when it is a solos competition. It's what both makes it so entertaining and also makes it so hard to keep up with, because there's 100 players, and usually, if you're in a duos competition, that's, 50 total teams. Trios, 33. Here in solos, you have 100 individual players to keep track of, and for somebody like Bach, if they just get lost in the fray, they're unfortunately going to find themselves with a couple of different issues, especially when they continue to drop in a hotly contested POI like Anvil Square. On repeat, we've seen multiple players be dropping here, but it still does kind of seem that not everybody's sticking to the potential drop mat that we saw earlier on the day. A couple of these POIs actually less contested than I was initially anticipating.
Yeah, that's kind of what happens in the first 2 games, right? You see a bunch of players land. They think they're going to have their drop to themselves, or maybe if they do get contested, that they should be able to win their drop. And unfortunately, they find out quickly that that's not actually the case. So they have to find themselves changing, and usually Game 3 is where we see the most changes on the map here for drop spots, and clearly that's what we're seeing now.
What we're seeing right now is also another player that we've had to pay attention to. Zynox here has had a great first game. The second game not nearly as successful. The good thing for them is that they were able to get a couple of points, I believe, here or there, and so maybe now that'll be enough for them to be able to play even more recovery here in the third game, because we're getting close to the halfway point here, and the halfway point is really where it's make or break. If you have not established yourself at that point, basically playing catch-ups through game 4, 5, and 6. And although I've seen players be able to make said catch-up and then all of a sudden just, win the entire event, it's a lot harder said than done, and it's definitely not as likely as if you establish yourself early and then just kind of ride that momentum. So for Zynox here, they got to be careful. If they have another shaky game like the second one, I don't know how much I'm willing to bet on them making said recovery, but only time will tell. Seemingly a little bit more of a passive third game here. Is that last time we got to this point where we were already getting close to the first zone, we had seen like 5 to 10 players already dropped.
Yeah, I mean, look, they definitely cannot afford to have a game 2 repeat here in game 3. So I definitely think they're going to play this way more passively, because literally in game 2, they went out as quick as a cat. I mean, they were basically gone before everybody even had their feet on the ground. So they're definitely going to have to switch it up here. Already surviving a bit longer than they did in game number 1, but it's going to be, honestly, it's going to be interesting. I'm curious who's going to be able to find themselves finding success here in this game, especially with how aggressive Pixo was in last game, but also our game 1 champ is still alive, meaning that he's still in this game. He still could be a factor for a lot of these players.
I feel like we're going to start seeing a couple of these players that are, just the fraggers, if you will. The guys who are racking up those 10 elimination games. They're going to start to just kind of get more and more confident in themselves. And off the spawn, we're going to see them start to take these fights against those who dare test them in their POIs. Again, Pixo's a little bit different. Pixo's got a non-POI drop. He's all the way at the north end, what is a little bit of an offshoot at that dock. But you never really know. For other players like Tiger Plays here, who are continually dropping on places like Slappy Shores, it's just going to continue to get harder and harder to avoid these early fights. Zynox seems to know that, though. This time, I don't think they're shying away from that fight. They got a decent loadout, and they've got one player underneath them who I believe is unsuspecting. I think they know that they're there, but they're not exactly sure where. So as it stands right now, Zynox trying to figure out a way to get to this high ground and maybe start to put the pressure on.
Honestly, Zynox being as sly as a fox here, just trying to stay out of the fight, staying out of the engagement, and staying alive, because they realized after game number 2, these players are no slouches. The players that are landing here in the area with him have the capability of taking him out, and he cannot afford to get taken out early again, so definitely a different play style from them. But we switch over to, honestly, the polar opposite of what we were just watching, and that was Ghost Deandron trying to get into a fight, now backing out, though, does take a little bit of damage on the way out, and uses what is almost left of their material. So going to have to back off here completely, use the existing building structure just to kind of play angles, stay alive, even regain some of that health from those slap barrels.
Honestly, that entire interaction made me think about a puppy dog and, just a little bit of an alpha dog around them. They go in, they big bark, very prepared to try and take the tackle, get a little bit into the fight, and then as soon as they get shots back at them, they go, oh, okay, never mind, my bad. And they back off, go into Slappy Shores and try and retreat just for a little while here. Maybe use some of the augments here, because again, augments early games are really going to not necessarily make or break you, but it really can determine how you want to play. You get something like Bush Warrior, all of a sudden you're able to play a little bit more precisely, or if you get something like Bloodhound, maybe you're going to start trying to take shots from a distance so that you can mark your opponents and really just play a very outward game. Play passively and just keep track of everybody around you. Speaking of keep track of everybody around you, look how many people are around Frenzy Fields here. Flamey, just one of the players within this, and you can see they're just shooting shots at everybody around them, and almost every shot is hitting at least something.
I mean, you're right. Look, Fix Me does find themselves falling behind here, but they're looking to get some of the wind under their wings here, pick up and fly up the leaderboard, hoping that game 3 will be the game for them to do that, and that's why they're playing as, honestly, as patient as they are. You saw them able to pick up the upgrades to the shotgun, despite there being tons of players close by, and even potentials for them to get into fights, and could even third party and win. They've played patient. They know, you know what? That's a risk, and it's not a risk that I'm willing to take, especially considering I've only been able to put 10 points on the board thus far.
That's the big thing for a lot of these players, is that now we're starting to get so far into the day that if they haven't been able to get themselves points, they're really going to focus here in this third game on trying to play that catch-up that we've been talking about all day long. For players like Steno here, it's the same idea. 11 points through 2 games, not going to be enough to get you a decent amount of chunk of change in your pocket when you exit out of this day, so here comes the recovery for them. For right now, though, they recognize that maybe Frenzy Fields isn't exactly the loot pool that they were hoping for. They've been able to find themselves a chest on the outskirts that they can get a decent amount of loot from, and maybe they'll try and take this fight another day. And it's a good idea because here comes that first zone. First one all the way through, so we're going to have to wonder whether or not certain players are going to start to get exposed within their rotations. Players like Leftaruni, unfortunately, going to be one of them. They're eliminated, and I can't believe I'm saying this. We're only down 12 players. I feel like every other time we've been down to at least, like, I would say 80. This time, 88 remain, and we're still going through our first zone.
Still going strong here, but honestly, you know, it's funny because we talked about how game 1 typically is like a different standard to the remainder of the games, but it seems like every game has almost been the same. Slow start, a bit of aggression from certain players that definitely feel more confident, but overall, definitely a little bit slower, which is why we keep seeing Storm Surge happen, but it hasn't changed. Pretty much the same story has been told from game 1 now to game 3, as, in my opinion, some of these players are picking up more confidence in fighting than I was even anticipating.
This is why the 6th game of the day is almost always my favorite one, because it's just absolute chaos. We get into the 6th game and everybody goes from this sort of passive play style where they've got, you know, their safety hats on, they're ready and prepared for whatever the fight might be, and they go, yeah, but like safety precautions, why? And just all of a sudden you're just seeing people charge into boxes, they're getting aggressive, and they're just getting in the face of their opponents for what feels like no reason, when the reality is it's the 6th game. Everybody's found their confidence, everybody has found their mojo, and they are ready to get going. So let's see, can Akira also be one of those players? What's going on with their opponent? Just exposes themselves in the box, and Akira gets a freebie out of nowhere on Cade, and it's got me scratching my head a little bit here, as I'm not really sure why that player was making the move that they were, but maybe they were trying to guard the edge here and play a little bit of a safer game. It's already come back to bite them, though, as again, this is the aggression that we've been seeing game after game after game after game. A player that we did see pop up in the top left, though, that I think you're going to have to pay attention to is going to be Teeny. Nevio, trying to find themselves in elimination similar to the opponents around them here and continually having some difficulties. They're getting shot from behind while still trying to charge into a box of another opponent, and it might work out. Nevio, though, need to be careful here. They've got shotgun shots on them, but they've only got a select amount of health items, so they need to be careful if they do have a player who can aggress against back them. They're seemingly not aggressing at all, though. More sort of resistance here as the player against Nevio is looking for their moment, and Nevio's over-aggression comes back to bite them. So persistent on that elimination, Panda, and they still were unable to find it.
It was so close, too. That's unfortunate, but it be like that sometimes here, folks. That's just how it plays out. But speaking of something else playing out, it's Kev FNBR. Now, I will say, Kev is a decent dude. Constantly see him on socials. Super positive about the PlayStation Cup and what they have going on. So great to see him competing here in the finals. 8 points on the board thus far. Definitely playing a little bit more passive, looking for the right opportunities, which honestly is the right play in my opinion. But no, unfortunately going to get caught out by another player there in the distance. Does need to be mindful of that other player behind, because all it takes is a few shots to deplete that health.
And honestly, that's what we've been seeing on time and time again. Again, we keep on talking about TTE, time to elimination, continuing to drop here in this current chapter. And it's one of these things where you just need to be very well aware of it. As we're seeing further into this day, players are getting more adjusted to that. They're not making as long a rotations unguarded as much as short rotations that they sort of reestablish themselves and then continue on from there. Players establish themselves very well here is going to be Topco. Again, finding themselves with some high ground early on. This is a little bit of a different strategy. When we talk about high ground, usually we are talking about it in the context of just harping over each other. So many different players within close proximity in very small zones. This is not a bad idea, though, is that if you do want to try and take the high ground here early on, maybe take a couple of different shots like you're seeing here with precision weapons, that'll just give you some decent Storm Surge. Because, again, Storm Surge has been such a problem for pretty much every player. Even our front runners have been struggling with the Storm Surge just due to how aggressive these lobbies have been.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And honestly, it's kind of refreshing. You know what I mean? Most high-level competitions with these structured lobbies, you have aggression, right? You have fights, but never to this extent. And it feels like nothing has slowed down. Despite there being Storm Surge and things happening, like these fights continue to be honestly a refreshing take on the way to play the PlayStation Cup, because I'm going to be real with you. With this being Europe, they are some of the best fighters in the world, so to see their skills showcased here on the big stage, it honestly makes this way more entertaining.
Honestly, it's nice for you and I, two North American guys, being able to watch a European competition and be able to see it this closely. Usually, if we want to be able to, we're watching through the eyes of somebody else, not necessarily being able to get our hands and, I guess, technically our words on it, if you will, being able to cast a competition like this. And it's so interesting to me to see the differences between these two regions in North America in comparison to EU. Yes, we do have technically NA West and NA East, but there's some more similarities between NA East and NA West than there are in between the entirety of North America versus EU. So, I love seeing it, especially when we also get games like this where it's kind of got everything that we usually know flipped on its head. Again, early aggression been something we've seen. Usually when the Storm Surge gets activated and we see that warning get popped up, everybody goes absolutely apoplectic. This time, 77 players remaining. A lot more than the usual we've seen by the time we get through to our second zone.
Yeah, I'm honestly, I don't know how to feel. Like, it's just not the traditional look that we get here in Fortnite, and honestly, I'm in my head, I'm trying to like rack the thoughts, like what could be the changing factor? Is it the hammers, right? Is it the fact that there's more easily accessible mobility across the map? There's so many things that could play into this. Either way, for us and for the viewers at home, these games have been a slam dunk.
Oh, I've been loving what we've been seeing so far here. Again, this is my second time being able to cast the PlayStation Cup, and both times have been such an honor, such a treat, and such a delight to watch. This one, absolutely no different. Honestly, this one might even be more entertaining than the first, because last time I was casting this, we did not have any of the hammers. The hammers were not in this, which makes it such a different meta. And again, when I first was really getting into competitive play and being able to sort of watch over Fortnite as a competitive scene, mobility was a huge thing people were talking about. Back then, it was the chili chugs that people were very intrigued by, as they were such an interesting little, just slight difference in the way that mobility worked with the unlimited sprint and being able to sort of maneuver just a little bit more quickly. Then come the web slingers, and we all of a sudden have a completely different sort of rotation, which is more through the air. One of my favorite chapters to be able to watch as a spectator, and now we come to here in this current chapter, where we have these shockwave hammers that have made it so interesting in the way that players maneuver around this map. And again, because it's a new map, it's the combination of the two. The fact that we have a brand new way of mobility that has not been utilized to this degree before, in comparison to also what is a brand new map. So the combination of the two of them have made for such an interesting change in the pace of play here, Panda, and honestly, I am all for it.
I'm all for it too. I'm gonna be real with you. Like, this is pretty exciting for us to get to break down, because it doesn't always work out this way, that like something is so drastically changing to the meta that it causes like everything, the whole full broadcast experience to change. And between the Storm Surge changes 2 seasons ago and now the hammers, we might have what could be the most entertaining meta that we've had in recent chapters, in my opinion. So this is going to continue to play out, though, as Deca now looking around, does have a few players close by, doesn't have a hammer like his counterparts there, just in the distance, so does need to be a little bit more careful in the way that they rotate. And get ready to build here, folks, because when you're out in the open like this, even if you are doing a little bit of a slide cancel there, you're still going to find yourself getting tagged up quite a bit, because these players in EU just don't miss.
Well, speaking of don't miss there, if I'm not mistaken, I think we'll see it pop up in the top left in a second. Yep, Topco, another early exit after a fantastic first game. They are not necessarily having as good a recovery as you and I might have anticipated. And honestly, I am noticing something about Deca, which I'm really surprised by. Everybody has had their eyes just to the skies. They are looking for players that are quite literally soaring through it as they use their hammers. So if you're just going through the ground, sneaky as a little mouse in the house, you might actually just be able to maneuver around players. This is something I have not seen before, is players that are actually utilizing a more safety, strategic, silent strategy to just kind of outplay their opponents, versus a lot of players who have been constantly with quicker rotations, more aggressive rotations. I think it'll work out here in these early rounds, these early circles. My question is whether or not this is going to be a viable strategy come, zones 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah, that's where the story really gets told, right? In those final moments, probably the hardest zones to play out in Fortnite. That's where you honestly, that's where the good game is played. That's where you see the real talent unfold here. But I gotta say this, like, these 100 players that are competing in this PlayStation Cup lobby are so evenly matched. I think there's a few players that are a little bit better at fighting, but then there's players that are better at getting to the end game. I mean, literally the skill level that we're seeing in this lobby is so particularly even that it makes it hard to predict who could end up coming out on top. And it's so exciting to get to watch this, because when there's so many unknowns, we get to be almost like a viewer and get to see the surprises as they come.
I love surprises, honestly. Personally, I'm a big fan of surprise parties, so this is just another treat for me as it stands right now. That being said, though, we have slowed down a little bit. Not many surprises as it currently stands here, and I think a lot of that has to do with where the zone has actually ended up pulling. The fourth one here, seemingly near the edge, where a lot of the players already remain. I will say this, I just jinxed the entire lobby. I'm like, yeah, you know, calm down. All of a sudden, 6 names pop up in the feed in the top left here. Regardless, it definitely does feel like we're starting to get into what was the passivity you and I spoke about earlier on. We said as the day goes on, we would start to see some changes in the way that players maneuver around. This is what we're talking about. We're basically halfway through this one, and we have half the lobby remaining in comparison to before, where we see many more eliminations, usually in quick succession around this time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, if you all are at home sitting here and you're like, man, I really want to get involved, don't forget, compete.playstation.com, get signed up, get your chance to compete here in the Fortnite PlayStation Cups and so many other PlayStation Cups going on throughout the months, because there's a lot going on. But now, though, it is F now, F in, finding himself right there in the center of quite a few of the players. Oh, he looks like he's just on the edge of zone. Might not be quite in, so they may have to move here in a second. But looking at the elimination feed, of course, it's Pixovsky picking up another elimination, making it 4 here on this game, and they do not plan to slow down anytime soon.
Yeah, we've got the 2 different contrasting views. We've got players that are taking this about as carefully as they can, just, you know, slowly tiptoeing their way into the zone. And then there's Pixovsky, who, just like an airliner, is soaring through the skies and basically being like, you want to try and take a shot? Go ahead. I'll put a target on my back, see if you can hit a bullseye. Because if you don't, I'll 180 on you almost immediately. This has been the Pixovsky way. And honestly, I kind of feel like him going down early in the first game was actually a problem for everybody else more than it was a problem for him. Because it sets him off. He goes, okay, cool, not a good first game. Yeah, great. All right, time for me to just literally key everybody that I see.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's probably the way to go for him. He's just such a good fighter, and clearly the nerves are getting to some of these players in the lobby. But all it takes is him running into the wrong player, like a Teeny, like an Alex FNR, who, honestly, they know how to put eliminations on the board as well and could end up going down. And unfortunately, oh my gosh, as I was going to say, Pixovsky could be going down. He immediately picks up another elimination, despite the player just diving into this box, having the health advantage. Pixovsky cleans him up with a beautiful shotgun shot.
Listen, I'm not biased at all here on the broadcast, but Pixovsky has been nothing but a pleasure to interact with, so seeing him get into precarious positions like that, it gets my heart a little bit tense here, and it also gets me a little bit tense because I want to see this man make the rest of the lobby and evolve, if you will. He has had such an incredible second game that if he continues to play this well through games 3, 4, 5, and continuing on, he's going to force a lot of players to get similar aggression styles to him, and honestly, it's not a bad idea, especially for players like Teeny, as we're seeing on the top of the screen right here. They have 3 eliminations as it stands right now, but they're going to need a lot more if they want to play catch-up. Again, 2 early exits. I think going out is either the second or third player in our second game. So for as it stands right now for Teeny here, they need to make a lot of aggressive moves here to just try and play some catch-up. The issue for them is that there's a lot of prominent players left, so they might run into somebody that's a little bit too tough for them to, you know, just kind of cruise on by, but they don't really have much of an option. 3 eliminations, 42 players remaining. They want to have a standout game number 3. They need to do just a little bit more.
A little bit more, especially here for Teeny, who 3 eliminations, it looks like the strongest elim game they've had up until this point. Looking to kind of finish this out strong. We do have a few more zones remaining. The big moving zone, the first one of its kind, presenting itself here in the 6th zone. So many players already set up on the edge. Pixovsky clearly still number 1 here, not only in the lobby, but in our overall leaderboard, which is why you see that big shining light over his name. So it's going to be interesting to see how he plays this out. But I got to say this. Honestly, you got to kind of compare him to a playmaker, right? Goals are not deserved. Goals are made. And Pixovsky is looking at these other players as goalies, and he's looking to just take every shot that he can and get every point he can on the board.
And this is why he's been so effective with that hammer as well. Again, it's one thing to just shoot past the goalie. It's another thing to just juke them out in the final third of the box and just all of a sudden just slide right past them oh so cleanly. Speaking of slide past, Pixo knew he had a shot there, but decided, the zone's on me. I don't need to take this fight right now. Let's see if I can get further in, and then maybe on the front side of zone, he will. Wait a minute! Did Pixovsky just use the hammer to rotate and pick up an elimination from fall damage along the way? Nah, this dude's different, man. This dude's something else.
Listen, sometimes those eliminations come to you, like we talked about, like whether the player comes into your box, you get the nice shot, whatever the case may be. That's literally an elimination just falling into your lap, honestly, metaphorically and seriously, because he just knocked him out with a hammer and dropped him, and he dies from fall damage. Unfortunate there for him, but eliminations are going to keep coming through as Pixovsky continues to move forward in this zone.
But he moves so much further as he finds his 6th elimination and his last. A little bit over eager. Continues to rotate with a hammer, but this is something we've already seen multiple times in the day, is that you want to rotate with that hammer. Get prepared. Wherever you land, do a 360, scout your surroundings, or you might have just ended up with another player who is hungry for eliminations as well. Pixo with another early exit here. The good thing for them, they had 6 eliminations. So theoretically, they should be okay, but definitely not the results they were looking for. And same for Buko in the bottom right. Another player we have been focusing on, who we will have to focus on in game number 4 instead.
Yeah, look, these games are going to continue to play out. Alex FNR still in this lobby, only 39 points on the board, knows that first place had somewhere at least in the 50s, now, as we know, in the 80s. So it's going to need to be a big game here for Alex to continue to climb up this leaderboard. But players like Trabzon still in this game. You see Severely still in this game. Zavi Fishy still in this game. So many players still alive here in these final moments. It's going to be tough to keep it going.
Oh, it's tough for a lot of players here. We're seeing a lot of them drop like flies here. 2 more, 3 more even exiting out, including Teeny, a player who we said needed a catch-up game number 3 in order to try and improve their standings overall and put them in a place to where they could even recover. 14th place, not bad, especially considering the last time we checked in on them, I think they had at least 3 eliminations, so maybe if they caught 1 or 2 more on top of that, they should be in a decent position to play a continual catch-up game throughout the rest of the night. Someone who needed to play catch-up last game and has now found themselves with a decent result here is going to be Tabzo, as we just saw there, and Trabzon as well, or excuse me, Tabco. Both of these players did not have themselves a decent game, and as well as Zynox here, all have to try and play very carefully, as this 3rd game now has shown them to be, again, still star-studded players, but need to be careful, because if they go out now with only 4 eliminations and a top 10 placement, it's a good result, but it ain't great, and it's not going to accelerate them past Pixovsky, who, like we said, was currently at the top of our leaderboard.
Zynox's redemption story could be on the horizon. We saw him drop early there in game number 2, had a great game number 1, now looking to make it a great game number 3 as he picks up Tiger Plays there in the elimination feed. And it looks like Alex now fighting for high ground. Needs to be careful though, because like we saw time and time again, those hammers are just breaking high ground out. So if you're not careful, you're going to be the next one to go. And there it is. Like we said, high ground gets broken out, does have the hammer, still going to be alive here, and tons of chug splashes. That's going to keep Alex in this game here as another player. It is Zynox going to go down, Trabzon going to go down. So many players falling, only 4 remain. Will Alex be able to clean this up?
Arnau, though, picks up 2 of those eliminations on 2 very, very skilled players, so maybe they're feeling themselves going into this one. The one thing nobody's feeling is building right now here. Nobody's got a decent amount of builds. I see 10, 16, not even that. 4 now as they are dropped from the heights here. So everybody gonna have to focus very carefully, use those builds to their advantage, and when you get into a box, maybe take the elimination off Nafri somehow into the same box as their opponent. Does not find the elimination and gets sent home as a result. Alex in a 1v1 here, though. The final elimination of the game. Shotgun shot to the sky, an SMG shot to outside the zone, and Alex finishes off with 6 eliminations in a victory royale in game number 3.
What a way to finish it, and what a way to come back, because remember, we tuned in with Alex, and he only had roughly about 38 points, so to finish that off with 68 points, great finish, and honestly, great plays. Held high ground for a little bit, unfortunately with the hammers, couldn't hold it entirely, but was able to recover quite strong. You saw him use the hammer himself, be able to recover from that high ground drop, but not only that, clean up some of the final players there in that moment. So congratulations, Alex, walking away with our Game 3 victory royale.
It was fascinating to watch there, too, because, again, we've been so critical of the high ground pretty much the entire day, but as we look back upon the replays here, maybe we'll get a little bit of an insight to how Alex was able to play this differently. In my opinion, it was the lack of aggression. Every time we saw Alex on the high ground, they actually weren't shooting. They actually weren't trying to take eliminations from that vantage point as much as just trying to figure out where their moments were. And I think that's a big thing that we're starting to see here is that pick and choose your moments, because otherwise you are Nevio, who charges into a box and continues to aggress a player and then kind of gets bit for it. So this is where we have to see that kind of pivoting point, Panda. I think players that are over-aggressive are going to start to find some punishment, and the ones that are able to maneuver around said over-aggression are the ones who are going to come out on top.
I mean, there's an old saying, defense wins championships, right? So it's not always the aggressive player that walks away out on top. Being defensive, being a little bit more passive could end up winning you not only this game or in a game, could win you the whole competition, making you the champion of the PlayStation Cup, but we still have 3 more games to go. We're at the halfway mark here, and it is not slowing down.
Oh, no, it is not at all. We see maybe a little bit of a step back here, but really, what's the difference between 60 miles an hour and 70? You're still absolutely just blazing it down the highway. And honestly, for players like Alex, I think that they are very happy that they can just go on cruise control from here on out. 2 very good starts as well. We saw Alex with not a bad start to the day, but to be able to tack on a plus 30 point, I think in total is 42 points, if I'm not mistaken now, from that Victory Royale alone. Yeah, they got to be feeling pretty confident going into the back half of the day.
No, definitely. I mean, look. The leaderboard is stacked. It is going to be very, very close. I do think Pixofsky still probably walking away with that first place spot after game number 3. However, it's going to be a tight race there in those final 3. Alex, obviously, going to be one of those contenders vying for the top spot, vying for the $2,000 from the first place, and vying for the opportunity to claim the PlayStation Cup champion #1 spot.
Honestly, I'd love to wear that crown at some point here, but unfortunately, I am washed. So instead, I just talk about the game in comparison here. But reality is none of the players we are watching as we stand right now are anywhere near that. We have seen some of the most incredible competition. And again, the thing that makes this so exciting, these are all players that are kind of like, again, next generation is the next sort of wave of Fortnite as it stands right now, because these are players who have done absolutely fantastically and found themselves on the leaderboard. Oh my goodness. We thought Pixo might still be in first. I did not think he would have a 20-point almost gap on second place.
Yeah, look, honestly, while second, third, fourth, fifth, they're kind of close, first place is kind of running away with it. So if Pixo can stay consistent, he will be claiming the championship yet again. He was the September champion, now looking to be the January champion of the PlayStation Cup. Could see that, but remember, 30 points for a victory royale and 3 games remain. That's 90 points on the board for someone to potentially claim. So even if you find yourself in 21st to 40th, you're not out.
Not by a long shot, especially for players that we're seeing in the back half here who are starting to just get started with their night. Teeny in 42nd place, I feel like, is one that we have to absolutely mention on repeat here. They only have 3 eliminations, but they picked up the 3 eliminations in that 3rd game. So after 2 not really great games to start off the day, now they're starting to find a little bit of a catch-up here. The issue for all these players, though, as we're looking past 60th and below, is they basically need to have 3 games of absolute perfection. The issue is that with those early games being so solid, you build yourself just a little bit of a safety net you can now rely on. So for someone like Pixo, they have a bad game number 4, that's fine. They're still 15 plus points ahead of pretty much the rest of the pack. So if they can just sort of get a couple of points here and there as we get into game number 4, they should have a chance to really establish themselves going into the back half of this night, but only time will tell. Panda, every time we try to get a prediction out here, it seems to go absolutely haywire and then chaos ensues.
Yeah, listen, there's no more predictions. We can't even begin to assume that we might have some insight on what happens, because it keeps telling, or the story keeps telling us that, you know what? This is an all-out brawl. Who's going to win? 3 games down, 3 games remain as the PlayStation Cup goes into the second half.
Oh, I'm so excited for this one, and honestly, it is for a number of reasons. Again, we've been seeing this narrative continue to build as the aggression continues to fluctuate high and low. Uber-aggressive games, and then a little bit of passivity, and then back to uber-aggression, and, well, let's see what we get in game number 4 as we hop off the battle bus and into the action again. POI's not nearly as contested as I anticipated here. I don't know about you, Panda, but it's interesting to see how many players are starting to opt for a safer drop off the battle bus rather than going for that early action.
Yeah, you know, I think, look, in solos, it's very, very tough to be contested, right? In a team mode, obviously, you can kind of rely on your teammate. You can play this out. You can catch one off guard from the other team. Like there's proper strategy in duos to be able to work together to be a little bit safer when contested. But in solos, you just don't know, because you could be in the middle of a fight and you could think it's the only person, and then all of a sudden 2 other solos pop up and they're spraying into your box, they're spraying at each other. It's an all-out brawl at one of these POIs, and unfortunately, no one comes out victorious in those situations.
Third party is absolutely, it's been around since the very beginning of Fortnite. It is still going to be around to this day, and, well, long after this competition, it will still be around as well. So you really do have to be careful, especially considering that we've talked about the mobility in this chapter has been so different. Because again, usually you're thinking of a third party. All right, somebody's, in a bush near you or just in another house, just a little bit off in the distance, and all of a sudden they're just going to wait their turn. No, if you want a third party in this one, hammer straight into somebody's box, and all of a sudden you're just stealing an elimination out straight from the feet of somebody else. So you need to be careful here, because it really does feel like with the current meta that we have, with so many people taking close range fights, it goes from what would be a 1v1 to a 2v1 to a 3v1 to whatever you might imagine before you could even blink. So for players like Zynox here, who has had a couple of unfortunate eliminations due to players that they weren't paying attention to, they need to be careful, and unfortunately they are not. Again, Zynox, you didn't even choose the actual main bastion and you're still getting punished for it. A very good first game, but outside of that, I don't know if I have any other compliments for the player.
So Zynox seems to be playing in every other game strategy. I'm not... and you know what's crazy is he was in 3rd place going into this game. So he's had 2 really solid games. It was 2nd place with 8 eliminations, 92nd place going down in the first 2 minutes of the game, and then that last game, 7th place, 5 elims. So 2 very, very strong games, but now 2 very, very weak games. And I don't know it's enough to balance it out. So it's going to be close to see how that story continues to unfold. But it's interesting to me. We saw him play that very, very differently. Literally just moments ago when we were watching game number 3, he was in the same situation, the same drop. He had switched from Brutal Bastion, went somewhere different, playing against the player, but played it very, very passively. And then there, played very aggressively. I know that he had a purple Thunder shotgun, and don't get me wrong, that thing slaps. But it's still, you have to just continue to play it a certain way and play it patiently. And unfortunately, Arrow didn't play it patiently enough as DeAndre caught him off guard and walks away with a beautiful elimination here in the early game.
And again, this is the big difference that we're talking about here. You see DeAndre just kind of waiting for their moment there, and as soon as they get that initial tag, that's when they start to continue to aggress. The issue in comparison is that you can't necessarily, once you do get a tag, trying to stick into the fight. Retreat. Do what you can to try and get yourself a little bit of health and get back to what would be a more fighting stance. For a lot of these players, it feels like they kind of just get caught off guard, start to fall onto their back heel, and then they never really recover. Again, it's a lot to do with what we've been talking about all day long, which is such a quick time to elimination, but you gotta try and find ways to subvert that, if that makes sense. You have to find ways to just be able to extend these fights just a little bit longer, find yourself some moments to heal up, because again, we have so many items for health within this current chapter that are very quick to get yourself back into a fight. Whether it's the Chug Splashes, which has been around for a while, or the new addition of Slap Juice here. Slap Juice is crazy, because not only is it very quick to be able to use, you can move while drinking Slap Juice, and that's a huge difference in comparison to some of the other items that we've seen here. So you really do need to be aware of how you can extend these fights out. It's not an easy thing to do. I'm not saying that's a guarantee, but when you have your moments to extend these fights, do whatever you can to extend them.
You're absolutely right. I mean, look, the slap juices are a perfect example of how to extend a fight, right? Run, drink, unlimited sprint.
Yep.
Like, you're going to get out of there, right? Obviously, another really easy way to do that, create separation in the boxes. I know that these players right now in this moment don't have a ton of material to work with, but they should have enough to build out a few boxes, create space, create separation, and let the other player make mistakes. Because more often than not, when they're over aggressive and they're just trying to dive into your box, they feel confident what they're doing, catch them off guard. Because not only, they might be confident, let me say that, but they probably aren't confident enough to take every single fight, and you might be able to catch them off guard. But regardless, though, now we switch over to new plays. This guy is interesting. We've seen him. We've tuned in with him quite a bit. 36 points on the board, but honestly, not necessarily any kind of breakout performance. In the first game of the day, 23rd place, 0 eliminations. Okay, 22 minutes alive. Remember, games only really last 25 minutes, so It's definitely good replacement. Second game was a 6th place with 5 eliminations. So 5 eliminations is good, 6th place is good, but you have to be consistent, or you have to go higher up than 6th place, because 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st is where you really see the points start to rack up. And then in game number 3, 44th place with 0 elim. So only getting eliminations in one game is not going to be enough to climb here. Despite them having 36 points now, they're going to need to play a lot different to continue to climb this leaderboard. But now, though, we switch over with Zarsi. Zarsi getting involved here, just trying to take some shots there from a distance, trying to gauge what they can do. And another player entering the fold here. It's actually 3 players here within the vicinity. So Zarsi going to need to be very, very careful in how they take this fight. They cannot afford to get caught off guard. That is the last thing they can do here in a situation like this. But now, it's all about the farm. Let's go back to it, get what you need here. And that's the best way to play the game. More often than not, if you ever watch closely the way that pros play Fortnite, is they take shots, move, and while they're moving, they're always getting material. You cannot slow down. You have to remember, material is by far the most important piece of all of this. Yes, hammers are very strong, but without mats, even the best hammer player is not going to get everything they need to do to be successful. So it really boils down to how many mats you can get and how you get them while you rotate.
As it stands right now, it looks like we're going to have a quick rotation for some of our players, but honestly, not as many as before here. The first time we're pulling it down to the southeast, which is kind of surprising to me, to be honest, overall, considering that we've had so many fights that have gone either north or very far west, but again, zones are random. You never really know what to predict here. For a lot of these players in Slappy Shores, they're going to be pretty happy as they have set themselves up on the very edge of the zone. Can kind of pick away at some of the players rotating from north from Lonely Labs and similar POIs. And again, this is kind of what we've been seeing on repeat, is that a lot of these easy eliminations come through players rotating overly aggressively. If they're exposed when they make their rotations, you're just going to get a couple of easy tags here or there. And even if you aren't getting the elimination, again, Storm Surge has been such a huge and prominent factor throughout the day that you do have to at least pay attention somewhat to the Storm Surge and hope that you can avoid it. That being said, we got a long way to go here. We're still in zone number 1, so we still have a little bit of time before the Storm Surge starts to become a prominent factor. But again, Panda, early tags, early eliminations, really good at just sort of giving yourself an easier chance once those rotations start to take place.
Absolutely. I mean, look, obviously positioning is key here in a lot of these situations, especially in the first few zones. And that's the nice thing about that new augment forecast. When you have forecast and you know what the next zone is going to be, you can position yourself early to get a bit of an edge into the competition, especially when it gets to moving zones. But we'll get into that in a little bit, because a lot more often than not, you can actually identify which players have forecast because you can see them getting to zone ahead of time. But we'll see here very, very shortly as this fight unfolds. Cade just looking to survive. Originally had the advantage, but just not aggressive enough to clean up the fight. Maybe not necessarily confident. Whatever the case may be, now Cade on the back foot. This player just trying to spray and pray into the box. And unfortunately, not going to be able to do it as Cade is able to completely disengage. Now going to heal up here. But this player, unlike Cade, is not going to let them rest. They realize they have him weak. They realize they have the advantage. So now it's all about the strike.
Okay, trying their best also to just retreat here, maybe get a little bit of extra health over and over again, trying to go for the big pot here, and it's just not going to be enough. Cade, at what point do you recognize this player's not going to give you the time, man? If you want to try and get through this fight, it's going to have to be through an eliminate. There's try number 3. Finally, I think they're actually going to get this one off. There's no way. Naze gives them a second, and Cade's got to be ecstatic as they will get off the heels and get back to full shield. And now I think that they might try to take the fight just a little bit differently. Shotgun in hand and then pre-edit ready to go. Cade, what you got here for us, my friend? You've been able to survive just a little bit longer, find your second point on the day. Let's see if you can find another 2 and double it.
Oh, here it is. Cade almost had the shot there. Unfortunately, not going to be able to connect it. They were able to build that floor just before Cade could fully get the shot off. But now, just a matter of reload, recycle, get some mats up, and keep it moving.
They're trying their best, but as it stands right now, it seems like a lot of players a bit hesitant to move. Again, rotation's been such a place where players have been exposed on repeat. I think we're going to see that continuing throughout the chapter. So Cade instead opting for the shotgun battle inside the house. They're still in fault. These splits just barely on the edge of zone. Technically, they will need to rotate, and I think that their opponent knows that. So Cade just trying to get shots from a distance. Unfortunately, hitting the structure they are within. 2 tag is going to drain them a 60 shield, but that is all that they will find. Cade instead going to opt to pick their augment, and honestly, not the worst idea. Again, that fight was going on a bit too long for my liking, and if you stick into it for too long, that's where you start to get exposed and get the risk of a third party.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Look, especially in solos, you have to be mindful of how long a fight can take. If you feel like you can't clean up the fight within a minute, don't take it. Because realistically, if you spend any longer than that, even a minute is pretty long. If you spend any longer than that, you are guaranteeing a third party coming your way here in solos. And that's what makes it very, very tough. But now Pixo actually playing the edge here. Quite a different strategy to what we've seen here in the past for him. Because originally, they were kind of wherever the players were. They were jumping into boxes, getting ready, getting into fights. But instead, playing the outside of zone, playing more for a heal focus. You see the floppers and chug splashes in hand. And just hoping to stay alive longer and longer in the game, playing for that placement.
This is confusing me, but honestly, also at the same time, probably the best idea I think I have ever seen. Pixo might have realized that they have enough of a gap on the second place player that if they can just literally survive until, say, the top 10 every one of these games by playing edge zone, they might just be able to win this entire thing. I mean, you and I saw this recently in a different competition where a player named Bolts did the exact same thing. They placed the edge of the water pretty much the entire competition and then came out on top of the end just due to having better placement points at an average than any of the other players in the competition. So I'm interested to see if that's what Pixo has done now, if they've maybe recognized exactly what you and I were talking about earlier on broadcast, that they have done enough legwork now that they can kind of just take a break and see what they need to do to make the adjustments. So if they take this 4th game strategically rather than aggressively, I'm all for it.
You know what? Look, I'm all for it too. I'm going to be real with you. Because, I mean, literally, they had what? A 13-point lead over second place. So 13 points is no easy feat. So if you just remain consistent, you don't even need eliminations. Just get top 10, top 5. Like, that's enough placement points to keep you ahead of the pack. Now, what Alex FNR can do is they can step up in a big way, get a big elimination game, and it could be an issue for Pixo. But I don't think it's going to be an issue here in game number 4. I feel like that'll be something that happens in game 5, forcing Pixo to be a little bit more aggressive in game 6. But that's just my early predictions here for how this might play out.
Zeri trying to get a little bit aggressive here due to the Storm Surge threshold. Maybe they're going to try and pick up the aggression that Pixo has dropped off, but unfortunately for them, they're having to use a lot of health items just to try and do that. Small pots being burned like there is no tomorrow, and they're just trying to get attacked from a distance. 73 or below, if they get one good shotgun shot, they should be fine, but instead they're just stalling, trying to get themselves some health, and it could come back to bite them. 20 health, make it 0. 64 players remain here as Akira finds an elimination, and again, this is why the Storm Surge has been so incredibly problematic throughout this chapter is that, again, with quick eliminations coming throughout this chapter, if you do get drained of even a little bit of health, that's enough to where somebody can come through with an SMG and a shotgun and send you home.
That's all it takes, man. That is all it takes. But looking at the standings right now, we've got 3 of our top 10 players already out here in game number 4. This continues to be the story of the PlayStation Cup, right? The top 10 supposed to be the identifier of the top players within a competition at any given moment. But we continually see players in the top 10 falling early and then the top 10 shifting. So realistically, anything goes here in these final moments as all these players play for the opportunity to continue to climb this leaderboard.
I don't know who is daring to challenge Pixo right now, but you are a bolder man than I. That is a dangerous game that you play as it stands right now. Pixo trying to go for a passive play here, and I think that this player is thinking that this is just a passive player overall, so they're trying to see if they can get aggressive. But they don't realize that this is first place, and first place as it stands right now does not want the elimination. That is why they're all the way on the outskirts here of the zone, and they're still getting shots anyways. And they saw a white tag there, which means they now know that there is a chance they could try and find another elimination. So Pixo, from passive to aggressive, might just see an opportunity, but not if they get drained of their health from almost 200 total to 84. What on earth hit Pixo?
I don't know, but like we talked about before, if you leave yourself exposed here in an EU lobby, you're going to get tagged up. And sure enough, it's Sean going to be able to pick up that huge damage there onto Pixo. As Pixo now just trying to overbuild, committing into the zone as far as they can. But Isan could potentially catch this other player that was giving Pixo some trouble. So realistically, neither of them are safe, especially with Isan looking from above.
Pixo's biggest issue right now is not only the player above them, but it's also the fact that they have 0 shield items on them. So they need to find some sort of health if they want to stay a little bit further in this game. Because again, as much as it is a good idea to try and focus on placement over eliminations for a player like Pixo, who has already established himself with enough eliminations throughout the day, he still needs to be able to guarantee himself into those later zones. And considering he is on the low ground right now with Isan and Miguel, as well as even Deandron on the other side, all peering down upon him, the question is, how does he rotate out? And honestly, I can't remember right now. It's been a moment since we looked at his inventory, but does Pixo have a hammer on him? I don't think so. So his rotation is going to be a bit slower as well.
Yeah, it is. I think, look, you don't have the hammer. You don't have a ton of material left because you had to overbuild. That's not going to be a top 10 situation, in my opinion. So we could potentially see Pixo going down pretty early here in this game. But players like Arzen, this is a great, honestly, great news, because now they have an opportunity to play this lobby out with the most aggressive player potentially going down early. So we'll see how this plays out, because he's still in it as of now, but he's going to be able to use his boat here. Super smart play. So in Chapter 4, you can actually use the boat now to shoot fishing spots, and it doesn't just drop your typical small fry. It can actually drop slurp fish like you see there, or shield fish as you see there, and also floppers. So huge change to the game there, and that's why now Pixo is able to put some shield on the board.
That is absolutely massive for him. That is the biggest brain play I think I have ever seen, and he's not even done yet. Still trying to see if he can find a couple of things. Again, the change here for Pixo, the reason why it has caught us off guard, and I feel like everybody in the audience needs to understand, is that this is not usually something we see. When a player is aggressive, when a player is feeling themselves, they're very confident in their ability to frag out, they just continue fragging out. They go after other players, they continue to charge into boxes, and they do a great job at just continuing with their aggression. To see Pixovsky be able to recognize that, hey, I have an opportunity here to just be able to play a little bit more passively, and I'll rack up enough passive points that I'll be able to win this game and win this entire competition. Incredibly intelligent. It is not always something that we see out of every player. Not everybody is able to recognize this. So for Pixo to recognize that, hey, just get a little bit of shields, play this passively, and wait for your moment, brilliant out of Pixovsky.
Brilliant indeed, but remember, there's players just on his heels. Alex FNR just a few points away. You had Zynox going down early, so probably going to fall out of the top 3. But Nafir still potentially in this game, and actually is in this game, as you see down low there as off Nafri. 0 eliminations on the board, playing a little bit more patient, does have the hammer, and could easily hammer his way into the top 3 in this game.
Oh, absolutely. The question is whether or not they're going to do that right here, right now, as we are 40 seconds away from our first half and half, or whether or not we're going to see that in a little while. Because obviously, opting for a strategy you and I spoke about before, if you don't have the hammer, you're attracting a lot less attention to yourself, and if you do it right, you can just avoid all conflict altogether. And again, it's so weird to see that the slower rotations are the less troublesome ones. The quick rotations with a hammer are seemingly are what are getting players exposed on repeat. It's such a change in comparison to previous chapters, because again, last chapter, if you're the first one trying to go through, you're maybe going to be able to get ahead of the pack and then fire behind you to try and get some of the stragglers that are straying behind. In this one, if you're the straggler behind, no one's paying attention to you, and you might just have an easier way through.
You definitely could be. You could be making a good way through. Alex FNR, though, making his way still into this end game and still alive, despite Pixovsky struggling, still in this game as well. And oh my gosh, what a huge elimination. And that is actually Nafir, who we just talked about moments ago, going down, potentially making his way into the top 3, but not sure if he'll be able to maintain it, because honestly, 40th place is not where you want to go down. And Pixo now picking up another elimination and finding himself a hammer. This is everything he needed and more to get really ahead of what is to come.
Pixovsky, how on earth do you keep getting away with this? The Andron had stayed there. We even mentioned that he might be one of the players who caused Pixovsky problems as he was holding the high ground to where Pixo was on the edge of that cliff face. All of a sudden, he sticks around a bit too long. Pixovsky, who again may not be trying to be a fragger right now, but is a very capable one, goes, all right, you might have bit off a little bit more than you can chew. And again, for a lot of these players, that has been the issue, is that they try and play with a little bit too much strategy, fight up against a better fragger, and then just don't really know how to react. Again, it is that separation into fights that we have not seen often enough. Players need to start recognizing that they can make these fights extend a little bit longer, and the odds of success are exponentially better.
Exponentially. And look, I think what we've seen right now is other players adapt, right? They've adapted to what Pixo has done. You see them picking up the pace, trying to get more eliminations, and Pixo has done the opposite. He's slowed down. Decided, you know what, I have enough of a lead. I don't need to put myself in unnecessary risks. Now it's just about staying alive. And unfortunately, Pixo not going to be able to build quick enough. And if you look, only 4 builds remains. Needs to get out of this fast if he wants to stay in game number 4.
Oh, he's going to need a siphon here. He needs a quick refresh, and oh, he might be able to get it. I don't think he recognizes that he had low builds, though, and that's the issue. He tried for a frontside rotation, and all it really does is expose him, because, again, quick rotations have put a target on your back, and there's nothing more you can do about it. The good thing for Pixovsky is they have found themselves at least a top 35 placement, and while that doesn't seem like a lot, it is huge for a player that has built himself such a lead as it has already, especially when we continue to drive the narrative that our front-running players are continually dropping out. Our top 10 is always full of holes of players who have found themselves with early exits and sent back to the lobby without a second thought. There are a couple more in this one who, oh well, I was just about to say Buko is actually in this one and probably could stay in for a little bit longer, but not if unfortunately to the hands of other players around them. So again, this has been the issue. So many of our front-running players have dropped off before we can even blink, and we might just see another one here as Joni found a player underneath them, got a shotgun shot to hit for over 100. Let's see if maybe they can finish the job.
He could be finishing the job here. He's got everything he needs. Great inventory to boot. And now, Alex FNR going down in the elimination feed. That is our second place player going down in 27th place, which means for players like Joni, now's your chance. Climb up this leaderboard, get every elimination that you can, and stay in it.
Ooh, Joni, though, they do need to be careful here. You can see they're getting ready for the rotation, but if they do get blocked and then get forced onto the high ground, they're going to have to play very carefully with only 64 builds. I will say, 64, a lot better than we've seen a lot of players go into these last couple of zones with. We've seen a lot of players go into zones 8, 9, and even sometimes 7 with less than 20 builds on them. So for the players that have been able to hold their builds for just a little bit longer, they've got a good chance here, even if the high ground hasn't necessarily been the key to victory that we have seen in seasons past. Usually it's a win condition that basically guarantees you the win. In this one, it's a little bit more chaotic due to that shockwave hammer. But for a player like Akira, they're just kind of waiting for the moment. Not using the hammer, not using the high ground, just kind of staying in the middle of the tarps, waiting to see their moment. Similar for Bach here. I feel like, again, we've spoken about Bach so many times on the day, but it's been issues of this, where they run out of builds, where they run out of materials, run out of things to work with, and when push comes to shove and they get stuck in a tough situation, they don't really know how to recover. This time, Bach, though, does figure it out. Elimination as they drop into a box, and that is a huge elim for them.
Huge pickup here. Remember, every elimination, 2 points in the pocket there. And that's why these players are getting these eliminations here in these final moments. So many still left in this game. 14 players in the 8th zone is not common. That is honestly a pretty stacked final moment. But for Bach, they need to play careful. 0 material left. They need to wait for somebody else to make a mistake and strike. And that's what you see him doing here. Now the hammer play comes out, ends up dropping high ground, and he could have potentially cleaned up that elimination.
Oh boy, there's a lot of coulda, woulda, shoulda stands right now, but I feel like for a lot of these players, they're just focusing on the now. If they dwell too much on the past, they could be in it for a world of hurt. If you're MDS, though, Yuki, not necessarily in that bad of a position. Again, high ground usually being hotly contested. Nobody's paying attention to the skies right now, and they're getting free shots on free shots. Yuki, again, just shotgun shot after shotgun shot. They're holding the high ground without anybody contesting them.
And you know, I'm going to be honest with you, I think there's enough layers down below that it'll stop most hammer plays. So remember, when there's enough structures between you, the hammer does end up getting stopped. And we saw it just there. Somebody made a hammer play, and unfortunately, it didn't go all the way up to high ground, so Yuki still going to be able to hold it. Now he just needs to be very, very careful. He only has 3 builds remaining and still needs to get off the high ground. Now, though, players down below finding some success. You see Joni, 7 eliminations. This is a big turnaround game. Just moments ago, we saw them with very limited material, very limited points, and now they're coming back.
Well, they were coming back for at least a moment. Yeah, listen, this is the way that it goes. Oh, but if you're Yuki, you gotta be ecstatic. You finally find the elimination you're looking for with 3 players remaining. Can you get even more into the fray? Shots from a distance, another elim. Let's make it a 4th. No, not quite. Shots might be missing, but with 3 players to go here, Panda, it's gonna come down to who can hit their shots, because builds are dwindling and Yuki is sent packing.
And here it is, folks. It is Bach, the player we continue time and time again tuning in with, saying, you know what? They have potential. They're doing a lot of the right things. Well, here it is. He's doing the right thing, folks, as he gets a huge tag to finish it off. 8 eliminations in the Victory Royale as Bach returns to the top of the leaderboard.
A brilliant play, 8 elims, 83 points. They find themselves with a massive climb back in comparison to what we had seen in games past. And the big thing for me is that they played it very strategically, recognizing the fact that that player's going to have to push out, whether it's with a hammer or with an edit. They've got their crosshair trained straight on them, and they are ready for the shot no matter what. And again, we're starting to see the shift that you and I had been waiting for. When does it go from that early aggression to all of a sudden passivity throughout? And as we look back upon the replays here, you can see the difference. A couple of early aggressions here or there, but for a lot of our front runners, they're starting to offer a more passive play just to see if they can get a couple of points here and there and just continue on their merry way.
You know, it's funny. Bach, going into this game, like in 16th, 17th, right? Now coming into this easily in the top 3.
Oh, yeah.
So it shows you how much one game can change the leaderboard here, folks. And it is not done. Pixo definitely going to have to be careful because Bach on the hunt for that top spot to take it away.
Honestly, this is anybody's game as it stands right now. The volatility been at an absolute high, and considering that we were halfway through the day, more than that at this point, the question is, in our final couple of games, who closes it out, and can they close it out as elegantly as Bach? I mean, again, look at this. Rotates in front of the player, recognizes they're going to pop out at some point, and even when they go high, their crosshair still stays trained straight on them, and that makes a world of a difference as we look here now at our winners. Not a single repeat so far. Honestly, a bit surprising, but also kind of in tune with the chaos that we've been watching.
Yeah, like we said, it's been so evenly matched amongst the players that make it into the end game. It's tough for any one player to just continually win. And so it's great to see Pixofsky and Alex and Bach and Topco make their way into a Victory Royale situation. But even if you have a Victory Royale, that doesn't mean you're securing yourself a top 3, because you see Topco there, who took our first VR, down in 7th.
Yeah, you can see it's a very volatile leaderboard as it stands right now. Pixofsky, though, he did exactly what he was supposed to there. Again, maybe finds a quote-unquote early exit out in game number 4, but they get enough points that they can at least edge themselves past what would be second place. 91 to first place, but that's also where we start to see the gap build here. Last time when we were looking at 21st to 40th, there was still a little bit of a chance of recovery. Now, they got to do more than just recover. They have to have a massive final 2 games, because 37 to 91 is a very long way to go.
Oh, it is. And look, here it is, folks. 2 games remain here on the day. 2 final opportunities for this leaderboard to shift, change, and rearrange. And with Alex and Pixo both being as consistent as they are, I can't see them falling out of the top 5. But realistically, we've seen bigger changes in seasons past with these PlayStation Cups. So anything goes as we get ready for game number 5.
I'm just sitting here shaking, just ready to get into this one. You can feel the anticipation in the air. And honestly, players probably feeling the exact same way as well. You have to imagine that the nerves are going to start to get to these players as they recognize the difference between a good 5th game and a good 6th game could be the difference between $2,000 and walking away with $200. Because again, unless you're within our top 50, you're not making over $200. And while $200 is a decent amount, you really want to go for those 4 digits. You want to go for that 1,000, 1,200, 1,400, all of that. And that is the top 10 only. So if you are within that top 10, here's where you got to start playing precise, because every little risky play that you play with could be the one that comes back to bite you.
It definitely could. Look, realistically, the prizing is great. These players are going for that great prizing, but it comes down to this. Game number 5. Will we see some shakeups? Could Pixo lose his top spot? Will we see Alex reclaim 2nd? Or will our new contender in Bach walk away with it as he claims second place after game 4. Could we see him take first? Here it is, folks. Game number 5 is underway. Bass, take us in.
Well, I'm ready for this one. We're going to hop off the battle bus and into the action. And again, I'm hoping this one may be a little bit more aggressive than the last. Again, we've been seeing a shift towards passivity as we get into these early fights. The question is whether or not we're going to see that again here in game number 5, because I will say, for our front runners, it makes sense. Play this one a little bit passively, try and see if you can rack up some extra points that, not necessarily go down too early to where you don't get any points within the game. However, for our players, like we were pointing out, the difference between first and 21st being almost a 60-point gap at this point, those are the players that now need to get aggressive. If you have not had a good day up until this point, well, this is kind of your last chance to turn it around, because as much as you probably can't get 60 points in a single game, you can definitely get 30 points in 2 different games and then find yourself a climb back up.
The climb. That is the story here of the next 2 games. Will somebody be able to climb? I mean, look, after game 4, Yuki surprised me, right? Yuki did very, very well in those final moments. Executed flawlessly to a game plan, and honestly, he could continue to pick that up, but no, Bach switching over quickly. Quick elimination for our game 4 winner, and honestly, that just continues to close the gap here. But as I say that, Pixovsky picks up one of his own.
Yeah, Pixovsky already off the bat. I mean, honestly, could you be any less surprised, in my opinion? I mean, it is what it is. At this point, this is just setting standard. This guy does not miss when the time is right. And although he's had some inconsistencies here or there, even in his worst moments, he has still had some great games and been able to establish himself oh so incredibly. And again, this is what makes this point where he is dropping in particular so incredibly interesting, is that it is on the edge of the map. And although there are only a couple of little spots here, there's Brutal Bastion and what I like to call the baby bastions all around it as it stands right now. These are very interesting spots to drop because it can give you not only a decent amount of loot, but it can also give you a good rotation into the zone as well, because the only other player around Pixovsky is quite literally at the dock that we were just speaking upon. And outside of that, he's basically free to do whatever he wants.
You know what's funny? So, Fortnite, if you don't know, for those at home, they have names for all these spots. Even though they don't put names on the map per se, they have names. So, this one is the Stone Tower. Just north of there, at the gas station, is called the Beep and Bounce.
I love that.
And then the little unnamed POI just north of there is the Crude Harbor. So it's funny that we have these areas where we know these brutal bastions. We know the obviously the frenzies. We know all the main names, but then there's these little ones just off and around, like hidden hints. Hidden hints. Literally, no one would know that unless you unlock the location and you hear it at that time, or, you look at some of our great resources in the community and look at the maps that have those names listed as well.
And that's why it's so important to study drop maps again. It's just so that you understand where these little extra hidden locations are and how to maneuver around them. Speaking of maneuver around them, Pixovsky trying to maneuver past this other player might have bit off a little bit more than they can chew. They're not a bit I was going to say, they should be a bit surprised by the resistance, but the resistance goes down very quickly. My goodness, Pixovsky, quick work of their opponent. I didn't even see that elimination.
Yeah, I'm going to be real with you. Pixovsky seemed way too confident for that fight, and I was like, man, this is rough. He just took a ton of damage. All of a sudden, that big old 90 shot with the shotgun turned it around. But realistically, Pixovsky's picked a great place to land. The Stone Tower is where I land in duos. I'm going to tell you, it's one of the best spots, but one of the best things we missed here on the replay. Huge shots coming out from Pixovsky. This was just moments into the first game. A player trying to just get away from the Stone Tower after landing there with him. Unfortunately, he just wasn't going to let that happen.
And I'm starting to recognize why we have seen Teeny so little on the leaderboard. That is who he actually took out of the air there. So that's the big issue here is that we have 2 of our most prominent players throughout the qualifiers landing within the exact same zone. And if I'm not mistaken, Teeny did not declare this as a drop spot going into this event. So maybe that's why they're starting to run into issues, is because Pixovsky wasn't backing down, and neither is the Andron here. Trabzin, another early exit. It feels like we're starting to say this. We've seen a couple players that popped off in the first couple of games, but haven't found consistency throughout. It's the ones that have been consistent throughout 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 games have been able to find themselves with solid results. The hit or miss players are starting to truly struggle here as we get into the end of the day.
You know, there's one thing we got to talk about, right? Consistently, some players have found themselves a hammer, but there's a reason for that. Hammers don't just drop out of regular chests, right? They drop out of those Oathbound chests as well, which are designated almost 100% spawn rate to certain POIs across the map. So definitely something to keep in mind, again, to pick up when you are going and deciding where you're going to land here in Chapter 4. But looking at this fight, it's literally the tale as old as time. High ground versus low ground, and high ground opting for the hammer. Because let's be honest, at some point you have to realize that this fight is going on too long and it's just not worth being there. And that's what they realized. But no, as I say that, he just finds a better high ground spot to have, takes some huge tags there with the red eye, and now has some really solid surge tags just in case that becomes a factor here shortly.
That was 2 shots and 2 just absolute drills of shots at that. Laser beams, if you will. And again, that's so valuable early on. Like you said, the Storm Surge may not be a factor right now, but when it does become a factor, the littlest differences are what's going to separate all of our players. So for Buke here, they're going to probably just play this one a little bit more passively after getting a couple of good shots here. In comparison to Frenzy Fields, where if you play passively, you're probably not escaping the fields, unfortunately. So many players continue to drop on this POI, whether it's on the outskirts or directly on top of it. For New T here, they're going to have to play this one very carefully because, again, shots from a distance so commonplace when you drop into hotly contested zones like this.
Yeah, I'm gonna be real with you, man. Like, you have to be mindful, right? You have to, like, it's funny, we talk about drops so often, but the importance of where you're landing and who you're going up against is key, because realistically, if you're going against players like Buko, you might just need to rethink where you're going. And even if you don't land together, if they're on your path, you need to find a different path.
Oh boy, these pathings starting to become much more gravelly than they are paved, unfortunately. It's a rough road ahead of you, and unfortunately the rough road is only just beginning here, because we're only 25 players down in game number 5. Still got a whole another one to go, and the Wingo probably not going to be able to find this if they can't survive this fight. I don't even know who shot them, and I don't know if they do either, and unfortunately they will never find out. Energy eliminates them from game number 5.
Oh my gosh. I mean, look, and it's funny, I'm like speechless right now from that fight, right? But on top of that, even Pixo in the elimination feed picking up another one. So, like, so much is happening, and I think players are starting to realize that eliminations are going to be their only way of coming back, and everyone is fighting. We're down to 72 players here, folks, and it's still the first zone, meaning that the aggression has picked up in a very, very big way.
Okay, I take it back. We thought that maybe there would be a shift towards the, passivity as we continued on throughout the day. I was just wrong. There's just a blip in the Matrix in game number 4, apparently, and that's what ended up changing this. I don't really know, because if we have Pixo back in an aggressive playstyle, the rest of y'all better watch out. And Energy better watch out if they get too aggressive. Outplaying their opponent.
Yeah, I'm going to be real with you. Like, I like Energy too. Energy is one of those players that we continually see here in these games, and he does usually a good job. Unfortunately, going to get caught off guard, just outplayed in that moment, walks away as the victor in that fight. But with players like Clap here in the lobby, Outplay needs to be careful because these players are on the hunt.
Everybody on the hunt. The question is whether or not who's going to hit their target just perfectly. Might be one. What do they do when getting an elimination? Clap out of nowhere. Claps back against them. And again, this is the craziest thing, is that I'm still pushing to have a little bit more of these extended fights. Every other player goes, you're just caster, what do you know? And just continually charging into boxes without any sort of hesitation. I mean, I commend them for it, even if it has my heart racing.
And listen, I don't think my heart has stopped racing throughout this entire competition. Like, literally, if I was hooked up to some kind of, like, cardiology machine right now and my doctor was sitting here, he'd probably be freaking out. He'd probably be like, you need to settle down, because it has been nonstop action here at the PlayStation Cup, and it doesn't stop here as Psych now looking to get into what is another fight, but really smart on his part, using the Bush Warrior augment to heal back up. Now he gets to save some of those heals there that he has, and unfortunately that bush is not going to last, though, as another player using a gas can to actually burn out the bush, forcing him to box away.
There's also another interesting augment that could have been as well. There's one that I don't remember the exact name of, but the exact way that the augment works is that if you shoot out other structures, there's a chance that they just explode once they're destroyed. And it's one of the most fascinating things I have ever seen because it does truly put in an element of surprise to where certain players just kind of have to sit there and go, all right, well, I've got a decent build around me. It's an actual structure. And then that structure explodes. So you do need to be extremely careful as it stands here because, again, this is the issue with early aggression is that so many players are going to start to try and just push into boxes. And if they have the correct augments, if they have the correct combination, they're going to push you out of your box and push you into a very precarious position. For Pixovsky, it's not that precarious. They have found themselves in early rotate, and although a couple of shots hit them from behind, I don't think they're going to be all too concerned about that because they have found themselves a decent structure and some more loot to loot up upon. And honestly, do they even really need that much more loot? Already here, 3 eliminations and a great loadout. Pixovsky set for the long run.
The future is looking bright here, folks, as Pixovsky's still surviving and thriving here, playing his normal play style and finding a lot of success. Now, Outplayed, though, really looking to turn up the heat here. Second elimination with only 13 points on the board. I'm curious why Outplayed didn't adapt this play style sooner.
They might be one of those players where it just kind of took them a little while to gain the confidence necessary. Or sometimes my favorite things is I love players that, again, push comes to shove, one of my favorite phrases because it really does make or break a player, is that backs against the wall and Outplay just goes, all right, you know what, I've been playing passively the rest of the night. Let's just see what I can do. And frags on out. Sometimes that's what you got to do is just pick up elimination after elimination and just bob heads as you go along. It's a fantastic way to play in these final games if you can do it right. The issue is it's just very risky. So he's got to be careful as it stands right now. Outplayed, not a bad start to the game, but we've seen this before, even with players like Pixo, where they get that early aggression, get confident, and then it comes back to bite them. So be careful, Outplayed. I'm not necessarily not confident in you, just maybe giving you a little bit of a warning.
Yeah, listen, a warning might be necessary. Folks, this lobby, with how aggressive everyone has changed, this might be the most unpredictable game that we've had thus far. We've talked about how it's hard for us to gauge who's going to win, who's going to do a lot of different things, especially with some of the inconsistencies in even Pixovsky. But with the way that these players have now picked up their aggressive nature and they are just fighting left and right, anyone they see, it seems like they're just trying to get involved into something. Even Pixovsky's not safe because all it takes is one wrong move, one wrong player to aggress towards Pixovsky, him get caught off guard even for a second, and that turns the fight into this other player's favor. So we'll see what happens as Cade ends up chopping out this other player. Really smart play on his part. Unfortunately, it's not going to be enough to cause any significant damage, so the hammer comes out and he rotates away.
And again, this is what we're starting to see from players like Cade in particular, the guys who are still trying to play a decent amount of catch-up just to try and improve the amount of money that they'll be able to take home at the end of the day. So what they're doing is they are trying to go for the aggression. They are taking a little bit of risk, but once they see the resistance, they kind of weigh their options and go, is this really worth it, and decide against it. Pixovsky here in a very weird position, in my opinion, because I believe there's someone directly above their builds that is more or less on top of them, and they seem to know that as they're continually checking left, right, and center, looking to see where they are. Pixovsky, you got to be careful here, because if you do get exposed, all of a sudden the third party is a lot more likely. Someone shoots from a distance and the player above you recognizes that, and you're going to be in not too great of a position. The good thing for them though, is that they have rotated a little bit further away, starting to get some separation between them and said player. And honestly, they don't necessarily need to even separate themselves that much further, because here comes the aggression by itself. Storm Surge officially active, and for a player like Pixovsky, they don't need to worry about it. It's everybody else around them who's now got to put on that worry.
I mean, look, I'd be worried if I could see PS Cup winners' inventory next to me, because legendary Thunder Shotgun, legendary Assault Rifle, and then, of course, the epic Gravity Hammer. Like, what a combo. You hammer into somebody's box and shotgun them, it's wraps, because that shotgun is a heavy hitter. It is actually... it can hit a potential 198, the closest thing to the 200 pump that we knew and loved from seasons past here in the Thunder Shotgun. So it is a heavy hitter. So I'm curious how it's going to play out. But if PS Cup wants to continue to put some points on the board, he may need to get a little bit more aggressive.
I love the shotgun so much. The Thunder shotgun, it brings me back. Panda, I may have gotten into the competitive scene in terms of casting only about a year or two ago, but when I first played this game was back in the very first chapter when this one was starting off, and I remember the shotgun meta back then. I utilized that to no degree, and my goodness, was it fun. And now with this new Thunder shotgun, it gives me a little bit of a glimmer of the past, that little bit of memories coming back to me, if you will. But there's nothing to really reminisce on as it stands right now. You got to focus on the game at hand, because with 64 players to go, and the Storm Surge continually threatening a lot of these players, it's time to get some extra tags and time to get further into the zone. One of our most central zones so far here today. This might be the most normal one we have had in comparison to the chaos that it has been giving us with the, RNG gods, if you will.
Yeah, remember here, Surge is still a factor. Despite there being more aggression, more players going down early, Surge is still a thing. And that's why the Surge indicator just came up, because now as we get ready to get into the 4th zone, just a minute away from the 4th zone, once it presents itself, it needs to be 54 players up in this lobby, or Surge is starting to tick away at anybody that is below that damage threshold. Fortunately for players like Pixo, they did a really good job of getting some damage early on, got some eliminations. Now they don't have to worry about it as much. But for players like Gord here, they do need to worry about it. They're only 30 damage above, which is not a lot to work with. So they need to get some more shots, and they need to get them fast.
They're trying their best here. The big issue for them, though, is that they got a lot of players around them, and they are on the very edge of zone. Players continually sort of looking at that edge of zone and wondering if maybe that's an opportunity for them. Speaking of opportunities here, somebody has drained Pixovsky of all of their shield, and I don't think that they're quite done yet. The aggression coming through, trying to challenge into their box, and Pixo seems to know that. They're waiting for their moment, or maybe just escaping the moment altogether. Hammers on out of there, and what a clean rotation. Literally no one around them, and they just got a free big pot. Are you kidding? A chest! What kind of rotation is that?
All right, guys, who's giving Pixo stuff now? Bass, is it you? This man just gravity hammered into a chest and a half pot. Literally everything he needed, to be honest. Now, obviously, he could use a little bit more material, but that's actually why he went in that direction in the first place. If you see, there's more brick kind of convoluted in that one little area, so it's going to be easy for him to refresh when he gets a moment, but he has to get a moment to do it. And it looks like he's going to go for it now. No, actually opting just to continue to rotate and moving forward, but unfortunately, Bach's going to pick up a player. I thought there for a second it was Pixo because the angle looked almost eerily similar, but it was actually another player he's going to be able to pick up. A huge elimination there for him.
Oh my goodness. Bach continuing to prove that they might have had a little bit of a slower start to the day, but they are not going to have a slow end. My goodness, have they picked up the heat and picked up the pace here in the last couple of games, and I don't think that they're quite done yet. Similarly, this game is not even close to done. We have over half the lobby remaining as it stands right now. 56 players still here out of a total of 100. And the 3 players that we're looking at right now, all 3 of them could have a huge game here to pop themselves even further up the leaderboard. Alex continuing to show themselves to be such a threat. Bach now showing themselves to be a threat in these later games. And, well, Pixo, I think you've heard us say his name enough. I think this is the one player that we pointed out very early on that has truly lived up to the hype that we surrounded them with.
Yeah, hype indeed. Look, these 3, right? Right now are the top 3 in the leaderboard. Whew. So you got Alex, Pixo, and Bach. Looking at the leaderboard right now, only Zynox has gone down in the top 10. So this remains a tight race. Not something we had seen in some of these other games. Because remember, every time I tuned in for the top 10 at this point in the game, 4, 5, even 6 people were down. So for there only to be 1 player out here in the top 10, this is going to be an interesting finish for the leaderboard, because realistically, Bach is very close behind Pixo. And of course, Alex is looking to vie right close behind Bach. So it'll be kind of cool to see how this plays out, but Alex is going to need to kind of hit the gas pedal quite a bit, because for both Bach and Pixo, they got 3 eliminations on the board. Alex, fortunately, has 0.
He may have 0, but he does have a decent amount of materials, and the big thing for me is that he does have a very good understanding of where he is on this leaderboard and is not playing too aggressively or too passively. He's trying to balance this very well in comparison to Bach and Pixo, who continue to aggress against other players, and although it's working out and they're having a decent amount of opportunities, they're wasting a lot of materials that they don't necessarily need to. A good example here, Bach may have a ton of health items on them, but why waste them when you could also just try and play this a bit more passively, especially considering their position within the zone. Speaking of positioning, look at the high and low here. We have found ourselves in between three different sections of the map. We've got the forest at the top of your screen. At the south of your screen is the open fields, and then to the left of your screen as you're looking is basically what I would call the tundra. All three of these combine in this little area, and it has created such random highs and lows here. Certain cliff faces that you have to scale, certain ones you just have to avoid, and it is made for what is going to be a relatively interesting half and half here for our 5th zone.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting. And honestly, there are some players, they've already made it in the zone, right? They're good to go. They don't even really need to do much, especially like Bach, for example. 128 builds in the inventory. That's great material. Now all they need to do is look back, take shots, and hope that they can pick up another elimination or two along the way. But for these players that are struggling to rotate forward, there's a lot on their plate. They're nervous. Their thought might not be trying to take shots. And fortunately for players like Bach, they're going to take advantage of that. That's what they want. They want you to hammer forward. They want you to get close to them so that they can box you up and take you out.
Again, boxing up and taking out has been a successful strategy, but it has also been a little bit of a, let's call it problematic strategy as well. We've seen so many times players just dive into boxes with those hammers, and the player who is dove upon, they recognize that and immediately turn around with a shotgun shot or an SMG to send you packing. So, again, there is risk involved on 100% of the time in almost every play that we have witnessed so far, and I think we're going to see a couple more plays as well. We have 41 players still going here. I feel like this might be the most we have seen going into our 6th zone. Usually by this point, we're starting to see the numbers dwindle. Again, it's just the highs and lows. Uber aggressive start to this game, and then a very passive middle of it, which has got me a little bit confused, if I'm being honest.
I mean, when is Fortnite not confusing?
Fair play. Fair play.
I'm going to be real with you. Listen, we all know, right? When you tune into Fortnite, it's kind of one of those unpredictable variables. You never really know what's going to happen, right? But we're still here, and we're making things happen as, oh no, Godson having a huge game up until this point. Unfortunately, now going to be sentenced to Storm from the hammer and does have some chug splashes, can potentially survive here. He does make his way back in, but with only 50 effective HP, it's not a lot to work with.
They're in a very precarious position. They drop on another player, though, and do they get the elimination? I don't think so. I think they just get a bunch of tags, and that's about it. Apparently, that's enough for them. They're satiated by that response, but they still need to get the chance to try and heal up. They will not do that, though. Godson continually getting charged upon. Somebody broke their box with a hammer, and it did nothing more. Had they recognized the opportunity, they surely would have had an elimination, but coulda, woulda, shoulda, I guess, here. So we're down to 34 players remaining in this 6th zone. Just about to close and move on to the 7th. So many names in the top left start flying. Box picks up yet another elimination, and again, the aggression out of our top 3 has been expected, but my goodness, has it been exciting.
Exciting indeed here as Bach still in this, still alive, although other players close by. He needs to be careful, though, using the hammer now to get ahead of the zone. Does a really good job of boxing up, but no, unfortunately catches another player, and Bach is out. Unfortunately caught off guard by a single player and unfortunately sent back to the lobby. And that's going to be a huge shift here, folks, because remember, Alex was not far behind.
Alex was not only not far behind, but the player who actually eliminated him was in 6th place. That was Nafrir, and that player then immediately goes down as well. So 2 of our top 10 in back-to-back go out of this game, and all of a sudden the leaderboard once again turned on its head. How many times have we said that here tonight? And honestly, I don't think it's the last time, because game number 5, well, it might be exciting. Game number 6 is where we're really going to see the make or break for so many of these players, and Godson in the game might just be one of those players to make it, not break it. My goodness, the shotgun shots from a distance, hammering home, but it's too much. They thought they had him. They thought Evasive was caught off guard, but Evasive says, nah, give me my 6th elimination.
Hey, listen, take it, man. Take it, because that was kind of given to you. I'm going to be real with you. Jumped in the box. Not in the healthiest spot, and Evasive going to be able to clean that up, but now he continues his reign. You see the hammer play come out. It does get ahead of the zone. Nice there on the edge, but will he be able to hold it? So many players still pushing forward. Alex still in this game. And wait, this could be it. Alex could take the 1st place spot.
Oh, it's just opened up for them. The question is whether or not they're going to be able to clutch it out to the correct degree. They get hit out of the zone. This is bad. They're going to take a decent amount of damage, and with no health items on them, they cannot afford that. Alex's biggest issue right now has nothing to do with his builds, nothing to do with his shots. It is the fact that he has got no health on him. Alex, my friend, you must find a siphon here. You must find a refresh. You need at least 1 more elimination, or it's not going to be enough. A shotgun shot will help you out. Pick up that big shield, and they do not, now recognizing the health on the ground. And that could be the downfall for Alex.
Yeah, it was tough, man. So many players still in that area. It was tough for him to potentially get it, but he walks away still alive for the moment. But he's going to need this win. He is just a few points off from where Pixofsky is. And now diving in the box, gets some huge tags there, but with no charges left in his hammer, gets caught and is unfortunately out.
And there it is, our top 10 all of a sudden wide open for whoever dare takes this victory royale. With only a couple players remaining, it is anybody's game. The question is, who's going to clutch up? Muddy Fishy here has a decent position, but they need to get into the zone. Yes, they do have the med mist on them, but they still have to make the rotate and finish off another 3 players. Just a couple is not going to be enough. Shotgun in hand, they're looking for the shot and cannot find it. There goes all of their builds, and Panda, their backs against the wall, just trying to find any sort of opening.
Backs against the wall. One shot can change it all as Muddy Fishy going up against Evasive. Evasive takes him out. Huge elimination there. But wait, it doesn't go through for him. That was not a siphon, meaning that somebody else was able to pick that up despite the huge shot there from Evasive. Now, though, he's up on the high ground, looking down. Just a few players here remaining in this. Now just trying to get in, trying to get involved. Shots come through, but nothing's going to connect as Evasive tries to finish it off. Does get it, but no, the elimination didn't come through. Cade now picking up 7 eliminations here as he looks to finish it with an 8th. And now the win comes through as Cade walking away as our Game 5 Victory Royale champion.
I like to call that a little bit of reverse skeet shooting here. Cade, instead of sending his opponent into the sky, does it himself and then shoots down from above. My goodness, the shot's on point in Cade. That feels like it's been a long time coming, my friend. We have tuned into you so many times throughout this day and have been waiting for that pop-off. From what I believe was like 20-some-odd points to probably over 50. My goodness, the turnaround for that player.
And like we talked about, this is not over. Even if you found yourself outside the top 10, top 20, even top 30, you can turn it around. And Cade is the perfect example of that there, folks, as we get ready for our final game. But we got to break down what we saw here in game number 5, right? Because there was so much to unfold that realistically is going to change the trajectory of what we thought for these final 2 games.
I mean, honestly, there's a lot to unpack here in this 5th game, and I honestly don't know if we're going to be able to do all of that. I mean, you knew it was going to be a good game when we start off with shots like this. Pixofsky from a distance just drilling his opponent, laser beam through the air. And
Beautiful.
Again, it's just, that's what it's been all day long, has been shots like that, players like this, outplayed again, popping up, a player we had not paid attention to, and I'm so sorry that we had not. The two eliminations we did see from you were spectacular.
Spectacular indeed, but there it is. Bach picking up eliminations as well. Look, the fight for the top spot is going to be a close one. No one has run away with it. No one is solidified it quite yet. And I can imagine that the top 3, top 4 is probably within a few points of each other.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be very close. But for players like Cade, who just had a big game, they could repeat that same energy, have another big game, and could disrupt the top 10 quite a bit.
I mean, this is why we were saying that you have to make sure you have a good Game 5 if you are far behind, and Cade doing exactly that. They are 5th Victory Royale winner on the night. The thing was, though, is that they couldn't rely on the 6th game. They had to at least do enough in the 5th game that in this 6th one, they can continue on their merry way, because as we take a look at the leaderboard here, Cade, despite having an incredible performance, still in 17th place. And as you predicted, Panda, our top 3 players all above 90 points as it stands right now.
91 to 99. That's the difference between not 1st and 2nd, but 1st and 3rd. So with 3 points difference between 1st and 2nd, and of course 8 points from 1st and 3rd, it's anybody's game. If Pixo goes down early, Bach could take it. If Pixo and Bach go down, Alex could easily take it. This is going to be a final game of the century here, folks, and it's all happening live at the PlayStation Cup.
Oh my goodness, I can't wait to see it. And honestly, part of me is cheering for our 2nd and 3rd place players as it stands right now, because Pixo, this would be their 2nd win here at the PlayStation Cup. They'd be able to go, not back-to-back, but at least 2 within a very short amount of time. In comparison to Bach and Alex, who I'm not sure if they've ever won a PlayStation Cup before. So we could see a repeat here, or we could see a brand new player altogether. And in addition to that, we could see some of these players pop on off. This is the crazy thing, is that 61st and below, you're walking away with some money, but these guys, these are the ones that are going to get aggressive. These are the ones that in game number 6, they're going to drop off spawn and just absolutely go head hunting.
Hey, listen, that's the only way they can kind of climb the leaderboard, right? They need big eliminations. You get 10 eliminations and a victory royale, that's 50 points. Let me repeat that. 10 eliminations, victory royale, 50 points. That is not unachievable here for any of these players because remember, this is 100 of the best PlayStation players from across Europe. This is no easy feat to even get to this point, and the fact that they did shows that they have a lot of skills that are unmatched to players that are out there. So, realistically, with the 100 best players left here in this final game, anything can change. Will we see a huge upset? Will Pixo run away with it? Or could Alex disrupt the top 3 and take home the top spot? So many answers, so much still left to go here, but it is time. Folks, we're not going to make you wait. Game 6 is upon us, the final game of the day, and here we go.
So ready for this one. The big things for me are also looking at not just our top 3 who have established themselves in very solid positions, but can we see another player in our top 10 really cause some problems for our top 3? Again, last time we talked about that, Bokt going down to none other than Nafri there, and as Nafri takes them out, all of a sudden, Nafri actually climbs all the way up to 4th place. So we still have those guys who are kind of poking and prodding and waiting for their moments within that top 10, and if they can get an early elimination, if they see any of those 3, Pixovsky, Bokt, or Alex go down in that elimination feed in the top left, you know for certain that they are going to start getting aggressive and try and make up that gap.
And it's a pretty interesting gap to make up. Look, so much is kind of left on the table here going into game number 6. Sometimes you're like, okay, this guy ran away with it. I mean, I remember Bugha and Miro running away with events, and it's like, you think about it, it's like, okay, game 6, now let's see who's going to make 5th or 4th or even 3rd, right? But no. Honestly, the top 10, anybody in the top 10 can disrupt the first place spot. Even 10th place, which is Akira, with 66 points. They win with 10 eliminations like we talked about, and Pixovsky goes off spawn. Literally, they take the top spot. So, I mean, really anything goes here, folks, but it's time.
Oh, and it's time for Pixovsky to find a weapon. That was terrifying. Both of them enter in. Pixovsky knows exactly who this is. He has dropped with Teeny every time, and actually, he's dropping 2 other players. 2 players on top of him, and
no!
Pixovsky out as one of our first, and it's revenge. Mana has gone down to Pixovsky more times than I can count, and this time, we have a little bit of a switch up.
Our first place player in Pixovsky is out, meaning that Bokt and Alex are running, vying for the top spot. Will one of them be able to pick it up? As now Zytrix also picking up some eliminations close by as well. Oh my gosh, does this make things interesting?
I don't know how to react, Pixovsky. I mean, they had been dropping in this area so many different times. You had talked about it before. It's the harbor out here that they've been switching between that and Beep and Bounce, as well as also the Stone Tower. All 3 of those positions are where Pixovsky has seemingly claimed as his drop spot. This time, though, unfortunately, apparently a couple other players seem to understand that, and off of spawn, he is done and dusted. I don't even know what to say at a certain point, because you have to imagine that for Bokt, as we're looking at him right now, he sees that in the top left, and he's got to be jubilant. He's got to be incredibly happy.
Yeah, but he shouldn't get too happy because he's not ahead yet. He needs to stay alive, and he needs to make sure that he doesn't take any unnecessary risk, because that's the biggest thing I've seen in seasons past, in any competition, where players feel comfortable, right? They see first place go down, and all of a sudden they take risks that they shouldn't. But now big shots come through, and he almost gets the elimination. Now diving into the box, looking to clean this up quickly. Could be a quick 2 points. Could put him closer to first place, but it also could put him in a very vicarious position.
Ooh, he's got to be careful here, Bokt. I understand you want to get aggressive, but again, remember this. If you go down here, there is no difference in the placement between you and your opponent in Pixovsky. You will both exit out with any points. Never mind. Say bye-bye, Bokt, sending their opponent packing for the final time tonight.
Bokt now just 1 point behind Pixovsky. That's all he needs to tie it up. 2 points to win it all. But Alex on the heels as well. This could be a tough finish. With all the players remaining around Bokt, it could be easy points or an easy way out here in Game 6.
And again, this feels like we probably should have been a little bit more expected of this. Again, Pixovsky, we said that on his best games, he was so incredibly good, fragging out like crazy, catching elimination after elimination, but his biggest issue was placement. And so when we did see that switch up to focus on placement, you and I had a little glimmer of hope, thinking that maybe that's how it would go. But unfortunately, the only 2 players that seemed to understand that in our top 3 were Bokt and Alex. And I do still feel like Box has got to be careful here. He probably has a little bit of a glimmer in his eye, and it's like, okay, I see my opportunity. I see my chance to take first place here, so let's get aggressive. Let's get these eliminations and stack on up. Be careful, because last time you did that, this player in particular, Nafri, was the one who sent you home. So you do not want to do that when you still have other players in the top 10 that are lurking. Yes, technically now the gap is a little bit better for them. 96 points to Box as it stands right now, technically 98 as they've been able to earn 2 more off that elimination. But Nafri is not that far behind them. They're at 79, which is, yes, it's just about a 20-point difference. 20 points is not as much as you might think. It's 10 eliminations, but it's also a first place and one of your opponents not making first place. So, for right now, for our top 3, please be careful. I know that you guys are confident. I know that you're excited by seeing that name pop up in the top left, but you've got a long game ahead of you.
A long game indeed here, folks, because remember, looking at what's going on in the game thus far, there's not a lot of people fighting. So it's still going to take a little bit for Bach to get 1, maybe 2 points. And remember, I'm trying to remember. Wait, Bach has a win. Pixo has a win.
Yes.
So it would, if they tied, let's just say, hypothetically, they tie, it would go down to who has more eliminations, and I'm pretty sure Pixovsky does.
I'm trying to look at this right now. Yes, 25 to Pixovsky.
Yeah. So I think if it goes down in a tie, Pixovsky wins the tiebreaker. But remember, Alex is still in this as well. I mean, look, so much could happen. Even Cade, like we said before, all it takes is top 3 to go down and Cade to have another win with 10 eliminations, and it's wraps. So the game is not yet over here, folks, as everyone is vying for a great spot there in the top 10 of the leaderboard.
Oh, this has been absolute chaos so far here. I'm so excited for what we are seeing. I'm also excited because this is a zone I don't think we've actually had pulled quite yet here. As you can see on the left side of your screen, we're going north this time. We're going into this little bit of a snowier area, and I love to see it because, again, we've had so many weird zones here and there that have pulled players out of very odd positions, and I have to just wonder if maybe for once we're going to see a little bit more of a spread out zone because, again, you go towards the south, you go towards like Frenzy Fields, towards, the shafts or the splits as well, and you're going to find yourself with a lot of decent structures around. You go north towards that sort of, Arctic tundra-esque area, there's a lot of open space for players to play with, so we might see a little bit of a difference in the rotations towards those later games. For right now, though, let's focus on the early games here. Box still within the POI, still trying to find a way out of Anvil Square unscathed. They're getting a decent amount of builds for right now, but this is a big issue when you drop on a hotly contested POI. If you're not careful, somebody's going to catch you off guard, and that could be another early exit for our front runners.
Yeah, this is tough here. You see several players close by, and with the zone not pulling away from Anvil Square, that makes it even tougher because he's going to try to find a way to get out while others may not. So realistically, this could be a really, really bad end to Bach's story, or this could be the way that he gets some extra points, finding one of these players seemingly off guard and taking it all home. We will see, though, as now we switch over to Arizen. Ooh, nice little tag there to start it off, but unfortunately not going to be enough to fully push, which is, honestly, it's the right play. You never want to just overcommit to something unless you have significant damage or a significant advantage in a fight.
I'm so surprised by what we're witnessing right here. As you guys can see on the bottom right, there are 4 players at a non-POI area this late into this one. This is called the Solitary Shrine is the technical name for this position, and I can't believe how many players have decided to fall upon that. There's even one a little bit further south towards what is going to be the Icy Islets, but I just can't believe it, especially when they're also getting aggressive. This is so different for me to see players that are not even needing to take these fights, and they go, it's 6 games, might as well.
It is, honestly. It's crazy when players realize, right? There's one of two things that you realize. It's either I need points, so I'm going to be aggressive, or you realize that, okay, well, I didn't get in the top 10, but might as well use this as practice because guess what? There are more PlayStation Cups always happening, so might as well get some shots in while you can, potentially get ready for the next one.
Oh, yeah, we got more events throughout the time. Again, it's January. This is literally the beginning of the year. If you guys think that this is the end for PlayStation, you are oh so wrong at this point here. You need to be very well aware because we got many things coming up here on the PlayStation channel, and, well, we still got a lot more to go on the day. 80 players still remain here, and although a couple of the players that maybe you guys have been keeping your eyes on are not going to be joining them, you got to just still pay attention. I cannot believe that we have Pixo out. I'm still a little bit flustered because we have been calling his name all night. He was getting better as the night goes on, and all it takes is one mistake, and that's the end of his entire competition.
One mistake, man. And look, honestly, he probably wasn't fully ready for it.
Yeah.
To be clear, he wasn't having 2 players land on him the entire day. He was able to fend off one if he got the gun first, whatever the case may be. Like, there was ways that he was winning off spawn. And I think that was actually, let me just double check, but I think, yeah, that was the first time he went down off spawn. So, unfortunate to see, but regardless, he can learn from it, because sometimes if you see multiple players land in there, even if you've won every game off spawn, if you need those points, you just gotta kind of dip off, go somewhere else.
Cool. Speaking of needing points here, it seems like F now understands that exactly as well. With DC Shotgun shot going to start the engagement here. The question is whether or not they can play enough pickup to make themselves get a decent placement. They're at 67 points, so they are within our top 10. I believe they are in 9th place as it stands right now. But if they can get that, if they can get a victory royale here and a decent amount of eliminations, maybe they can prop themselves up a little bit further and take home a greater chunk of that prize pool. It doesn't necessarily look like they're going to get too aggressive, though. Honestly, again, this is where the 6 game always intrigues me. You have players who get uber aggressive. They recognize, it's now or never, so let me just go absolutely, guns a-blazing straight towards all of my opponents. And then you have the players that play it passively who go, well, I don't want to go get eliminated too early, so I'm going to play carefully. And you can see this little dance, the samba back and forth between Now and Zone Crisis. And I think Crisis actually might just be able to take down F Now as they're getting shotgun shots on, chasing them through the boxes. They've got a decent amount of health. For F Now just continually going down, and there it is. Another top 10 player sent packing here in game number 6.
There are so many in the top 10 that are struggling here in this final game here, folks. And that honestly, that's good news for like Cade, for example, right? We talked about Cade winning the last game, found himself in 17th, but with a big game here, even if he doesn't climb into the top spot, let's just say, he can climb into the top 10, top 5, changing the way that prizing structure works for him, and that's really going to be the goal. But now, though, you saw there for Bach, Alex was there in the distance. That could be an unsuspecting fight that could turn the tide of the top 3, honestly, permanently.
It's always so interesting to me to see when we have those front-running players end up going up against each other and just not knowing how big of an opponent that they are fighting here. Pixon, it looks like they might just be able to find themselves with a decent fight here. They're going to have to take a second to retreat and heal on up, but they absolutely have the ability to. And again, these early fights are so interesting because you never really know who you're going to end up fighting when it comes to these early fights. You could find somebody who is just getting caught in rotation. You could find somebody who is looking for set aggression. It always is an absolute gamble. Let's see, they're going to stick with the gamble. Exxon, what are you going to do here? You got a player around you. You're on the edge of zone. You got to make a rotation here. Either that or you have to make this fight and get the siphon. You have no health items to work with, only shields. Playing a risky game here, Panda, and I don't know if it's going to necessarily pay off how they think.
Well, one thing I noticed, right? Pixon has minis. He's not full shield. So, realistically, you could have popped a mini there. There's so many things that you could have done, unfortunately, better in that situation. But sometimes those nerves, those final game jitters get to you, and you make mistakes. But fortunately for them, they're getting a second chance, a second wind, if you will, as they find some beautiful things left in Storm, that including 2 half pods.
It's huge for them. Sometimes, again, luck of the draw. We saw that last one with Pixo as they found themselves the most random spawn of a chest as well as also that half shield, and it was so incredibly influential to the rest of their game. Question is whether or not that's going to make a big difference in this one as we check in on Alex instead and then focus in on Cryptic. Good timing there. Shout out to our observation team as they let us see an absolutely brutal elimination.
Yeah, solid finish there for Cryptic. Just getting in there, getting it done, and then keep moving. Now, extra material there, can build out more boxes, do what they need to do. But remember, there's another player just kind of looming on that wall. So if they're not careful, they can end up getting picked up in the same fashion that they got that elimination.
Honestly, at this point, I don't even want to try and predict who's getting eliminated. I'm just too tense. It's just so much action going on here in this game. It feels like if we turn away for even a moment, you might miss an elimination. It might miss another player dropping out of our top 10. Again, we've already had multiple exits from a couple different players, including our front runner in Pixo, coming into this game, who was in first place with almost 100 points. They will unfortunately exit without hitting that triple-digit mark. And similar for a couple others that we have mentioned as well. I will say, usually we have 3 or 4 drop dropped out by now. I believe it is only 2 total, maybe 2 or 3. So holding our breath in anticipation, as it feels like once we do get to those later zones, we're going to start to see a lot of action hurry up very quickly.
Honestly, anything goes here. It can change in literally a second. Bach now tied with Pixo, looking to potentially catch a player off guard here, but needs to be very, very careful. Doesn't control almost anything in the surrounding area. Big tags come through, though, as a player just trying to hammer away, and Alex still in this as well. So if Bach goes down now, it is all up to Alex to potentially take that top spot.
Ooh, Bach, though, still continuing on. They understand the risks that they are playing with, and they're going to, unfortunately, maybe have the consequences of them come back to bite them. We said this so many times here throughout the night. That phrase has got to be absolutely ingrained in all of your minds watching as it stands right now, but for a good reason. This risk versus reward gameplay that we are watching right now, and it is really only being utilized by Bach. Alex is taking a completely different approach. They are recognizing that they just need to last longer than the rest of their opponents here. If they can get a couple eliminations while finishing in the top 5, that's a ton of good points that they can work with. In comparison to Bach, who wants to quite literally muscle their way past the rest of the competition due to getting aggressive, due to getting eliminations, and they're still hunting after this one. They are separating themselves just a little bit, pushing a bit further back against this mountain's edge, but they are not going further, all too far away from that opponent. They recognize that they've got one in front of them, and I'm not sure if they recognize that they have the one right next to them, but they probably should. They've got an elimination somewhere in here if they can play this strategically enough.
Yeah, I mean, look, speaking of strategic, Max here needs to play this very strategic. Only 20 HP, now needs to sit on the back foot for a bit, heal up, and so now, though, they're moving, opting for the impulse play. That's risky with the limited HP that they have, especially if it just happens to go sideways just a bit. You take a little bit more damage, and unfortunately, you'd end up being out. Now, though, 100 effective HP in total, looking to continue this fight on. Will they be able to climb? Big shot comes through, though, and now they just continue to press forward, almost using another impulse nade there as well. And that would have been the end of the game here for Max if they had used that impulse in that moment.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with those impulses. They are both a great weapon or great utilization, as well as also, you know, can be your downfall at many moments here. I'll be honest, though, Max might be seeing their downfall pretty quickly either way. They don't have a lot of health on them. They're in a very odd position. They've got someone in front of them who knows that they're there. They go right back to hiding behind the pill. Honestly, you know what? Props to you. Shotgun shot, exit out. You know, you don't need to do too much. You just have to do enough, and I think it's exactly what they have found. Get themselves a couple more tags, but Max, you need more than that. You need an elimination. You need a refresh here, or you're climbing through the rest of this game.
At this point, they need to get out.
Yeah.
They cannot afford to be this far away from zone and find themselves falling behind. I mean, look, realistically, this zone is going to start closing in rapidly, and unfortunately, there's just way too many players contested on this edge. So for Max, they can't sit in storm, they can't keep the edge, and they don't have a hammer. So they can't rotate forward, but now, officially, as you can see on the board here, folks, Bach has taken first place, but will he be able to hold it? That's the question.
Especially when Alex is still in a very, very close position. 93 points, only 7 separating them. If Alex gets a couple of attacks here and there, some eliminations, he can close that gap very quickly. And again, it also still comes down to placement. Only 50 players have gone out of this last game. There's still 50 remaining. Alex might be one of the ones joining them as he exits out, though. He's going to use the Chug Splash to gain back a little bit of health, but you can see this is the difference between Alex and everybody else that we've been watching on the day. They are not taking a fight unless they have to. They are very hesitant to get involved in the action, versus Bach, who has found themselves continually within the action and continually in precarious positions. And this is where it becomes problematic, Panda. They have no health items on them. No shields, no health items, nothing to work with, and only 40 builds. Bach, you might have done a little bit too much here in this final game, and it very well could come back to spell your downfall.
I'm going to be honest with you. I think Alex wins. Ooh. Look at how consistent Alex is playing. Look at the inventory. Look at the way this is playing out. Material for either of them is not great, but it's very, very close. But Alex has heals. Alex is way healthier, and Bach, unfortunately, has a ton of people around him and still needs to get in the zone. So, I don't know. It's going to be very, very close, but I think Alex could take it. If I had to make a final caster prediction, that's what I'm saying, man.
I get you with this one. The only reason I'm still a little bit hesitant on Alex is that he's yet to be able to find that refresh that you and I have been asking him to hunt for. And in comparison, Box is finding those refreshes. He found a second elimination, gets himself a couple more builds, and although he doesn't get health items, the big items he does have is that hammer. If Alex gets caught in the wrong position on the wrong side of zone, he's going to be in a very, very awkward position where he needs to make a rotation and won't have many items to help him out with that. So, Alex, as good as you are playing right now, you need to get at least one elimination, and you need to pray that the elimination you do find has a hammer on them. You have a slot open specifically for that. We know that's why you're keeping it open. Now you need to find that elimination if you want a chance at victory.
And Bach here just holding on, like impressively holding on too, mind you, because realistically, if 95% of the lobby here was in a similar position as Bach, probably would have went down by now. But Bach has done a good job of continually separating themselves from the action when needed, healing up and sitting on the back foot, waiting for these other players to strike so he can just counter when deemed necessary. But when Alex is playing just so consistently, it's hard to count him out from potentially winning this.
Question is, though, is whether or not he's going to be able to, like we said, continue that consistency, find that hammer that he needs, and continue on their way. A player who I do also want to make sure that we keep track of, or at least mention a couple times, Nafir is still in this one. They're still around, and although there was an almost 20-point gap between them and what is now first place, if they've been able to survive this long, and if they can find a couple eliminations, there's a pretty good chance that they might just be able to close that gap and continue on their way. So, Bach and Alex, although they are definitely still our front runners here and definitely still the players to watch, I hope that people are still paying attention, that we've got a top 10, that although many of them have already gone down, good examples, Muddy Fishy and Akira, there are still ones remaining who can potentially turn the tides.
Yeah, I mean, look, what, there's 4 people in the top 10 that are out already? And with somebody on Alex's wall, this could be another one down. Now opting to use the hammer. Very weak, though. That is very, very risky, because all it takes is a few shots in the air and Alex would have been out. But still in it, still alive. And Nafir, though, looking to... Wait, could Nafir potentially take this other player off guard? You see him staring. He wants it. He knows that player's there. He can hear him. You can hear the footsteps, hear the movement. But no, actually opting to use the hammer to rotate. Great play on his part, as Alex now getting ahead of zone. So much is going on, and so much is still at play here as this continues to play out, Bess.
Oh my goodness, I'm very happy that we've now gotten a little bit of insight to Nafri here. The good thing is that they also don't have eliminations yet, so we can kind of just, tuck them in our back pocket for at least the moment and kind of wait to check back in on them when the action starts to pick up, because action's picking up for Alex and Bach, and you have to imagine that for Nafri, it's going to do the exact same thing. Again, these are basically our top 3 right now. If Nafri can last long enough, he will just straight up pass Pixovsky due to placement points alone. There's no guarantees of that, but we're starting to get closer to that as time goes on, and to be honest, I'm a bit surprised. We have 37 players remaining and going through what is almost the end of our 6th zone. The 7th one is about to be about as jam-packed as physically possible. So, excitement's continuing to turn up the heat, and Alex is unfortunately getting burned in the kitchen. They are out of shields yet again. How many times have we tuned into Alex and seen them just drained of their health, having to use every resource available?
So often. It happens time and time again. But look, I just don't see this ending quite yet for either Alex or Bach. I think we could see them not only in a 1v2 for the leaderboard, but a 1v2 in the final moments of the game.
Question is whether or not, though, that Bach can be aware of his position and find a refresh. He needs this one. He's got 13 builds and dwindling health. He's got literally no health items on him. So, Bach, this is make or break. You need an elimination here. You need health items, or it'll come back to bite ya. He charges into a box with another player. I don't know if that other player recognizes that, but Bach, unfortunately, just wastes a bunch of materials for no reason. They try to box up to avoid the other player, and all they've done is drain themselves down to their final 3. They're not even going to use it here. They're going to mantle with another player, 2 of them side by side. Neither one of them take a shot, and how?
I don't know how he continues to survive. The hammer play into Storm, it's done. Bach is out. It is now all up to Alex. Alex now still in this game, still potentially can do something. So many in the top 10 still alive, so lots of potential for shakeup here, as now Blazified on the high ground. Teeny there as well. Could potentially get some eliminations now, though. Players dropping left and right. The hammer dropping players as well. And Zay opting for the double hammer play. Respect.
Ooh, I like the double hammer play. We haven't seen a lot of it here today, but it all depends on what you're looking for. If you're basically going off of rotations and placement, yeah, that's how you want to play. So Zay putting themselves in a good position, but again, do they have enough to catch up? Our front two players are out. Pixovsky sent home packing. Bach sent home packing as well, and now it is just Alex and Nafri, who are the two players still in this lobby that have a potential to take that first place and take the whole PlayStation Cup home if they dare so choose. Zay still trying to stay alive, though. They'd like to be involved in the action here, and as we tune into Sammy, they might also get involved in the action. So many names in the top left popping up. Can Sammy avoid being one of them?
Honestly, I'm looking and I'm not seeing Alex. I think he's out. I think it's done. I think it's it, folks. I think Sammy could potentially walk away. There still could be some huge changes on the leaderboard, but I think our top three are out. And honestly, I don't know who was able to take it.
I have to imagine Bach at least passed Pixovsky. I think we had full confirmation of that. The question is anybody else in our top 10 around that could shake this up even further here? I'm just trying to find somebody who on earth could potentially be in this one. 6 other players besides Sammy remaining. And Sammy, I don't even know if they're going to stay around that much longer. They got a single build on them, and although they have shields, they need to be careful. So many players pressing down above them, trying their best to get through here. They're going to make the rotation. They're going to go straight into zone, though. They need to get back in. 24 health. No health items to work with, but a siphon will not come through. Zertalk's going to take them out and end their chances here in game number 6.
Wow. Zertalk's now here just trying to clean it up, trying to finish it strong here as he takes out Teeny. It's a 1v1, though. Zertalk's now going ahead, going to go for high ground as this other player just struggling to stay up.
Ooh, Zertalk. Where is the other player? We will never find out. Gorter gonna take the final victory royale of the day. And although it may not propel them all the way to first place, it has left us with a wanting, a needing to know who's taking this whole thing home.
This competition has been intense. Start to finish, it has been a close one. 6 games have been played by 100 of Europe's best PlayStation players, and it comes down to this. We gotta highlight some of the amazing action that unfolded there in game number 6 before we get into the final result, because honestly, this was kind of a turning point for the entire leaderboard.
This was insanity from the very get-go. The fact that we had Pixovsky go down off of spawn, you knew something was in the air. There was just that feeling that this one was going to get chaotic, and my gosh, did it deliver. Every single moment we tune into a player in the top 10, and they are either in a precarious position, or unfortunately, they're sent home. A good example here, Crisis ends up taking down F now, and Bach, although they did have a good game, I don't know if it was enough. Him and Alex were toe-to-toe this entire game 6.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was close. It was very close. But we will find out shortly. But we gotta talk about it, man. Zertalk's seemed like he had everything to win this game. And then Gord appears with the hammer play, the shotgun shot to clean it up. And here it is, folks. Our 6 winners from the games today. Topco to start the day. Pixovsky to win game 2, Alex game 3, Fox game 4, Cade with game 5, and Gord with game 6. That is our 6 winners of the 6 games today, but here it is, folks. We have to break down the top 100, and then we will find out who walks away as the champion. Right there, 80th to 100 was that 20-point range. I kind of anticipated it being roughly around there. These are some of the players that struggled off spawn, maybe not finding that traction they were looking for. Now you get to the next page, they found some traction in some games, found some eliminations in others, and unfortunately just didn't add up into the top 50. But then we break it down, 40th to 60, here it is, Bass.
It was an incredible one, and although, you know, it's not necessarily the best game for all of these players, I do want to point out, in 88th place was the player, Mata, that ended up taking down Pixovsky in the final game. So even if you are at the bottom of this leaderboard, you've still got some influence on the overall standings, and look who comes out on top. Bach able to outlast their opponents, and with 105 points, a victory royale, and 21 eliminations, they are your PlayStation Cup champion.
And what a close finish. Look at Alex and Pixovsky there in the final moment. Alex survived, but it still wasn't enough. 1 point off of taking over second place. So congratulations to obviously our Victor and Bach. Congratulations to our top 3 in Pixovsky and Alex. And of course, thank you all for competing today. You all have been absolutely amazing. Don't forget, if you want to be involved in these competitions, make sure to go to compete.playstation.com, get signed up, get involved, whether it's the Fortnite PlayStation Cup or some of the other titles that they support. Now is your chance to get entered. And don't forget, that's not the only thing going on at compete.playstation.com. No. Make sure to go check out the Win-a-thon as well, folks, because remember, you can rack up wins in PlayStation tournaments through all of December and January for a chance to win prizes like the new DualSense Edge controller or PlayStation 5 consoles. Yes, PlayStation 5 consoles, folks. Sign up on console and start competing for prizes today. The full rules can be read on compete.playstation.com. But there's other ways for you to get involved, right, Bass?
Oh, absolutely. If you guys would like to learn a little bit more, you can head over to the Discord. Join the PlayStation Tournaments community Discord to find regular updates on esports events, articles, videos, and meet other players to improve your game. The PlayStation Tournaments community Discord regularly hosts play sessions, interviews with figures of the community, and other special content. As you guys can see on screen, you got a link in front of you as well as a QR code, which you can scan to join either way. Multiple options how to get involved, so why not get involved, especially with more events coming up in the future?
And it's not just more Fortnite events, more titles as well. Get involved in some of the Fight Night games. I mean, look, Tekken, childhood right there. Street Fighters, you got Mortal Kombat. I mean, look, if you're a fighting game connoisseur, get involved. Compete.playstation.com. All the information is housed there. So make sure you're getting involved not only in this, not only in the Fortnite events, but check out everything that PlayStation has to offer in these PlayStation Cups. But, wow, Bass. Final thoughts on the day.
Honestly, so happy to be back here at the PlayStation Cup. It's been a little while, but the good thing is that not only am I a familiar face returning, but I saw some familiar faces returning as well. Shout out to Pixo, man. He gave it his all. An unfortunate result in that final game, and despite the huge lead that he had built, it was not enough. But at the same time, you can see it down below. Shout out to our champion. Bocht comes through with $2,000 more in their pocket and a crown upon their head with the engraving PlayStation Cup champion. Congratulations to him. Honestly, what an event it was.
What an event indeed, and thank you to PlayStation for putting this on. Without you all, we wouldn't have Bocht as a champion and us hanging out here with the community. So again, thank you all so much for being here, hanging out, tuning in with us, but there are more to come. So make sure to stay tuned. Go to compete.playstation.com, and until next time, take it easy, Fortnite fam.
PlayStation